Okay, here we go. Turn my camera on. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session virtual meeting. It is Thursday, September 17th, 2020. The time is now 4:03 p.m. Due to concerns over COVID-19 exposure, the city has implemented measures to protect our community, including the closing of council chambers and limiting public attendance to electronic means only. Members of the public may view the live meeting proceedings on Tempe Channel 11 or attend the meeting virtually through Cisco WebEx events by visiting tempe.gov/clerk for more information. First item on the agenda is the call to the audience for issue review session items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the City Council. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who submitted a card?
Mayor, yes, we do. We have items C, E, and F that have had cards submitted. And I did advise that they'd probably be called forward contemporaneous with the item once council reaches the item.
Sounds good. Okay, as long as we've got a running list, we'll call them when it's appropriate. So thank you. All right, next up here, item number 1 here. So I've already kind of done the call to the audience, I guess. So once again, City Council welcomes public comment on this time on items listed under Section 2, issue review session items, and Sections 4A and 4B, Committee of the Whole items on this work study session agenda, and there is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. We will, as Madam Clerk said, we will actually hear from you in the item that your comments correspond to. Item number 2 is 2A, the 2020 Water and Wastewater Rate Study recommendations. And I'm just going to call upon staff to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Terry Pecars. I'm going to share my screen. And if you could just confirm that you're seeing that.
Yes, I can see it, Terry.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Terry Pecars, Municipal Utilities Director for the City of Tempe. And with me today is Tara Ford, Deputy Municipal Utilities Director over our Water Utilities Division. Tara and I are here with you today to present the recommendations of our 2020 Water and Wastewater Rate Study. The city conducts cost of service or rate studies every 2 years with the assistance of a financial services consulting firm. Stantec is our consultant for this year's rate study and has been working with the city in conducting similar studies for our enterprise fund since 2015. The rate study is conducted in accordance with principles and methodologies established by the American Water Works Association, which is the water industry standard in the United States, with a cost-based allocation methodology and development of rates and charges that are just and reasonable per state law and legally defensible. We are here this afternoon seeking your feedback and policy guidance. We are not asking you to make a decision regarding the rate study recommendations or adopt any specific revenue adjustment. After receiving guidance from Council, staff will gather additional public feedback on the proposed rate changes and return to the City Council for formal policy approval. The 2020 Water and Wastewater Rate Study aligns with and supports these City Council strategic priorities. High quality, reliable, secure, and cost-effective water services provided the essential foundation for quality of life, economic growth, and job creation in our community. With the support of Council and the community, we will continue executing the city's water management strategy and provide the high level of service our customers have come to expect. As a starting point for the rate study process to provide direction to our consultant, certain assumptions were necessary regarding previous council policy guidance. The cost-based approach has been used in previous rate studies and was used again this year as it is industry best practice. Advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI data, provides an accurate and precise understanding of customer use, demand characteristics, and the true cost of service by customer classification. It has been the consensus of Council that we continue our water conservation and water efficiency efforts. We have a robust program of outreach, education, and support that provides significant resources to the community. During the last rate study in 2017, Council adopted a 50% cost recovery rate structure for flood irrigation customers, which was the first rate increase for flood irrigation since 2005. This guidance was followed again this year. There are several components to a comprehensive water and wastewater rate study, starting with the utilities revenue requirements. The utilities revenue requirements represent the total amount of money a utility must collect from customers to pay all costs of providing the service. This is determined by identifying all current and estimated future operations and maintenance and capital costs over a 10-year period. This process ensures that the utility will have enough revenue to fund services and meet its reserve fund balance policy. Once revenue requirements are determined, the next step in the process is proportional cost allocation. Cost allocation is a process by which costs are assigned proportionally to each respective customer class based on their respective water demand characteristics. This is achieved by reviewing all customer classifications' water demand characteristics, including historical customer class water usage and peaking, along with emerging demographic and conservation trends to determine the true cost of providing service to each customer class. Once the utility's revenue requirements have been determined and the costs have been allocated proportionally by customer, the next step in the process is rate design. Rate design is the development of the most appropriate rate structure to satisfy an organization's strategic and operational goals. Objectives can be from promoting water efficiency and conservation to minimizing customer affordability concerns to promoting economic development. Rate design also includes an analysis of the impact of proposed rate adjustments or rate structure changes on utility customers. This analysis includes seeking of feedback from city leadership, city council, and the community in making adjustments where appropriate. The ultimate success of any rate study is largely dependent on communication. Communication throughout this process is key to ensuring utility customer involvement and understanding by all involved of the rate study process and data, the potential need for adjustments, national trends and council priorities, etc. Active stakeholder participation is an effective way of involving parties representative of the community served and the respective customer classes receiving input and ensuring transparency, and is vital to the comprehensive water rate study process. I'll now turn it over to Tara to discuss our customer outreach and community engagement efforts. Tara.
Thank you, Terry. We engage our customers in a number of different ways. In addition to our other outreach and engagement efforts, such as public webinars, the rate study webpage, and presentations to various commissions, this year we formed a community stakeholder group to participate in this process. The community stakeholder group was made up of 10 unique water customers representing each of the respective customer classes: low-income customers, neighborhood associations, business and industry, community organizations, and business organizations. 4 working sessions were held with the stakeholder group, city staff, and our financial consultant to review, discuss, and receive input on the various components of the rate study process, as well as the study recommendations. The first of 2 virtual webinars was held in June and available to all members of the public. We conduct extensive outreach year-round to all water customers. In 2020, we added direct calls to large volume residential customers, or LVRCs, not yet registered in WaterSmart, to our overall customer outreach strategy. Of the 3,346 LVRCs, we directly called all of the 2,519 who had phone numbers associated with their water accounts and that had not yet registered for WaterSmart. This outreach effort resulted in 463 additional WaterSmart registrations. This year to date, all LVRCs have received at least one form of outreach regarding Tempe's water conservation programs, with many having been contacted by numerous means. Of these LVRCs, 62 have enrolled in the Water Efficiency Certification Pilot Program, or WEC. The WEC program provides the opportunity for LVRCs to receive a rate incentive, being charged the Tier 4 rate for Tier 5 water usage, for water efficiency efforts on the part of the customer. The main reason residents sign up for WEC are to save money and water. Some residents are more interested in the consult itself rather than joining the WEC program in order to learn how to conserve water and save money on the utility bill. Overall, the residents that have enrolled in the WEC pilot program are happy with it. The WEC pilot program concludes in March of 2021. Staff will compile results from the pilot program and present to council for their evaluation. And now with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Terry.
Okay, thanks, Tara. Each customer classification has different water demand characteristics and thus places different demands and costs on our system. AMI data has provided great insight into customer water use and allows for very precise and accurate proportional cost allocation based on actual water usage down to the hourly maximum water demand. This graph indicates customer maximum day water demands for 2019, indicated as a ratio or peaking factor to average day demand across the respective customer classes. Utility costs are significantly impacted by peak demands on the water system, since the water system is designed, built, operated, and maintained to meet these peak water demands at all times. Water mains, booster pump stations, and water storage tanks, for example, are sized to meet these specific customer water demands when they occur. This is why peak demands are a significant factor in cost of service calculations in our rate study, and why we recover costs proportionally from the customer classes creating these peak demands. Proportional cost allocation means that customer charges and rates are based on the cost to satisfy the respective customer's water demand characteristics relative to average day demand, maximum day demand, and peak hour demand. Customers with higher average day, maximum day, and peak hour demands are assigned higher charges, while customers with lower average day, maximum day, and peak hour demands are assigned lower charges. This is the cost-based approach to proportional utility cost allocation. Taking a look at peak hour water demand for the same period, you can see the even greater demand variability our system experiences. This graph further illustrates the large variation in peak water demand across the respective customer classes. We use maximum day and peak hour AMI data to determine each customer class's added capacity, maximum hour and peak day demand, to proportionally allocate the cost associated with providing this level of service. With AMI data, instead of just 12 data points annually for each customer that we had previously, we now have 8,760 data points annually for each customer. This precise data results in fewer assumptions. Customer demand characteristics and peaking information results in a very accurate proportional cost allocation. AMI data clearly and accurately depicts the average day demand, maximum day demand, and peak hour demand for each customer class. This graph shows the water demands our system must be able to meet at all times, even if they occur only 1 hour of the day or only 1 day of the year. For example, the single-family residential customer classification peak hour water demand can reach almost 12 times the average day water demand. Again, the water system is designed, built, operated, and maintained to meet these peak water demands at all times. The rate study recommends a levelized revenue increase of 5.5% per year over the next 10 years to collect sufficient revenue to fund services and meet the minimum reserve fund balance policy. While the rate study recommends increases annually over the next 10 years, we will be coming back to council to adopt a single revenue increase, and will review revenue requirements and update council each year thereafter. There is no revenue increase required for the wastewater utility at this time. The rate model projects revenue increases needed for wastewater beginning in 2023. The flood irrigation program is currently projected to recover less than 50% of the cost to operate the system in fiscal year 2021. The rate study recommends a 9.7% revenue increase to maintain the current council policy of 50% recovery of total operating costs. This graph summarizes the cost of service analysis results compared to current revenue. While the overall system requires 5.5% more revenue, class-specific changes can be higher or lower depending on the cost of service and current revenue remittance. Most changes are due to peaking characteristics, multifamily being over-recovered and landscaping being under-recovered, for example, based on AMI data. Water service rates are made up of two components, a fixed monthly service charge and a monthly metered water volume charge. This table provides a listing of the fixed monthly service charges we charge customers based on meter size. Fixed monthly service charges recover costs associated with administrative and customer service functions, including billing, metering, meter reading, and customer service, plus a portion of the average day or base system capacity cost. The portion of the average day cost charge is scaled by meter size and calculated using the most recent 3-year average of monthly water use. Leveraging AMI data to update customer usage characteristics and looking at a 3-year average of the water use across all customer classifications, this year's rate study recommends updating fixed monthly service charges to recalibrate the proportion of revenue recovered from fixed costs from the respective meter size customers and to increase the overall portion of cost recovery from this revenue source. Monthly service charges were last updated in January 2014. At that time, revenue from monthly service charges represented 23% of the water utilities' total revenue. Since then, 2 monthly metered water volume rate increases have been adopted without coinciding adjustment to monthly service charges. As a result, revenue from monthly service charges has fallen to 19% of the water utilities' total revenue. Industry standard is 20 to 30% of revenue from fixed costs. Revenue from fixed cost assists in stabilizing the utilities' revenue stream, and lower levels of fixed cost recovery can potentially impact bond ratings. The recommended overall increase in monthly service charges would result in 22% of the utilities' revenue being recovered from these fixed costs. Monthly metered water volume charges for other customer classifications are calculated by taking the total revenue requirement, subtracting the fixed cost recovery, and then dividing by metered water volume each month. Uniform rates are common in customer classes with customer-specific demand profiles, such as those listed. For single-family residential customer class, the rate study recommends no changes to tier sizing based on the cost allocation analysis. The cost-based approach to proportional cost allocation, average day, maximum day, and peak hour, is utilized to determine monthly metered water volume charges per tier. It's important to note that tier pricing is applied only to the billable units of water consumed within the respective tier. Each customer pays the same amount for the billable units of water they use within each respective tier. For example, a customer using 20,000 gallons of water in a month would pay $1.84 per 1,000 gallons in Tier 1, $2.83 per 1,000 gallons in Tier 2, $3.89 per 1,000 gallons in Tier 3, etc. These graphs depict average volume customer and large volume customer bill impacts. The total percent change in the customer's bill is impacted by both the change in the fixed monthly service charge and the change in the monthly metered water volume charge. And even though the overall recommendation of the rate study is a 5.5% revenue increase, as you can see based on AMI data and proportional cost allocation, we can see a slightly higher than 5.5 or slightly lower than 5.5 increase in any individual group of customers. These graphs provide a comparison of Tempe's current and proposed average monthly water bills to other valley communities. Currently, and even with the proposed increase, Tempe's average monthly water bills Flood irrigation is a distinct service that provides irrigation water to 900 private customers in 16 Tempe parks. The flood irrigation program is currently projected to recover under half of the cost to operate the system in fiscal year 21. The rate study recommends a revenue increase to maintain the current council policy of 50% recovery of total operating costs as depicted in the table. The bar graph depicts the semi-annual bill impact of maintaining the current council policy of 50% recovery of total operating costs for 2 customers with different lot sizes. The semi-annual impact to these 2 customers is approximately $27 and $54 respectively. An important perspective to have when considering the provision of water services is an understanding that costs can vary significantly, not only locally, but across the region and throughout the nation. This is a snapshot comparison put together by an industry group, Circle of Blue, where they collected water and wastewater cost information from cities and utilities across the country. We asked our consultant to add Tempe to this map for comparison purposes. The key takeaway is that unlike a lot of other communities across the country that are struggling with infrastructure issues, Seattle and Atlanta, for example, or water resource constraints or restrictions such as back east or in California or Texas, it's important to keep in mind that the desert Southwest is generally one of the lower cost regions for water and wastewater services across the country. What all of these communities have in common, including ours, are the challenges associated with aging infrastructure, increasing regulatory requirements, operational cost inflation, and changes in customer use behaviors, causing significant upward pressure on rates to be able to continue to provide a high level of service in face of those pressures. And it's important to note that although the monthly prices for the cities listed are from a survey completed in 2015, Tempe's $60 is current. The survey is for a family of 4 using 100 gallons of water per person per day, or approximately 12,000 gallons of water per month. In summary, the 2020 Water and Wastewater Rate Study is recommending a 5.5% annual water revenue increase, adjusting a proportional cost recovery for each customer classification, adjusting monthly service charges to increase fixed cost recovery, a 9.7% flood irrigation revenue increase to maintain the current 50% cost recovery policy, and no change in the wastewater revenue at this time. The rate study process and subsequent recommendations relative to revenue adjustments are based on the objectives of ensuring that the utility collects sufficient revenue to fund services and meet its minimum reserve fund balance policy, which is the amount equal to 25% of annual operating revenue plus 2% of the gross book value of assets. Utility systems have little margin for failure and are expected to provide uninterrupted service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Many utility assets are located in hard-to-reach places such as below ground and are intermingled with other assets within easements. Utility assets are also very complex and expensive to repair or replace. Reserve funds for utility systems set aside resources for a specific cash flow requirement, financial need, project task, or legal covenant. Reserves can play a significant role in addressing current and future challenges facing the utility, such as demand volatility, water supply costs, large capital requirements, and potential liabilities from system failures associated with aged infrastructure. Maintaining adequate operating reserves enhances the utility's ability to manage potential risks, provides the means to absorb fluctuations in revenue, and the ability to meet working capital needs. Operating reserves are also important when facing fiscal emergencies that can result from emergency repairs, droughts, natural disasters, and unforeseen economic influences. Staff is requesting council direction on the recommended revenue increase. Given current economic uncertainties amid the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to provide council with a view of what a delayed implementation of the recommended revenue increase would look like. This graph provides a visual representation of the impacts to the reserve fund balance if the recommended revenue increases are adopted, but their implementation is delayed. A levelized annual revenue increase of 5.5% starting in January 21 would result in the utility meeting forecasted expenses and staying at or above the minimum reserve fund balance policy over the 10-year period. Delaying implementation would result in a more rapid drawdown of the reserve fund balance and may necessitate future revenue adjustments greater than 5.5% recommended. Although a delay in implementing the recommended revenue adjustment may not seem significant, the compounding effect on revenue year over year has an impact on and diminishes the reserve fund balance. While temporary postponement of the recommended revenue increase will result in an accelerated drawdown or spending of the utility's reserve fund balance and could result in a higher future rate increase, it may be both prudent and appropriate to draw upon the utility's rainy day fund at this time and not add further financial pressure to our customers. This graph indicates the estimated percent of revenue increase required to stay at or above the utility's minimum reserve fund balance policy should the recommended 5.5% levelized revenue increase be postponed until after January 1st, 2021. We included this graph only as a visual indication of what the impact of a delayed implementation may look like. The rate study recommends a levelized 5.5% revenue increase, and that's what we're providing for consideration. This graph is just for illustration purposes. Should it be the will of council to decide something other than what's being recommended in the rate study? Our water utility is currently in a favorable financial position due to our reserve fund balance, which can be utilized to dampen dramatic rate increases and thereby not overly impact customers. The strategy of reserve fund balance utilization or drawdown was included in this year's rate study and is reflected in the recommendations. This graph provides a representation of water and wastewater revenue increases over the last 18 years. It's not uncommon to experience the need for revenue increases following years where at least nominal rate increases were not adopted. Many communities employ a strategy implementing measured, consistent revenue increases over time instead of postponing or skipping annual revenue increases as a way of avoiding rate spiking. It's important to remember that water and wastewater utilities face generally steeper increases in costs than we see in overall inflation. Typical consumer price index inflation is in the 3% per year range. Water and wastewater cost increases have typically been in the 4 to 7% per year range, which results in potential rate impacts in the near and long term. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're here this afternoon seeking your feedback and policy guidance. We're not asking you to make a decision regarding the rate study recommendations as presented or adopt any specific revenue adjustment. After receiving your guidance, staff will gather additional public feedback on proposed revenue changes and return to City Council for formal policy approval. Our next steps include a second public meeting on September 22nd, presentations to the Neighborhood Advisory and Sustainability Commissions on September 21st and September 30th, respectively, and the public hearing and council consideration of rate adoption on December 3rd. Comment cards will be available to the public following this meeting, and the public comment period will continue until October 2nd. And with that, we'll try to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Really appreciate it. I see Councilmember Adams has her hands up. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor Woods. Terry, excellent presentation and very easy to follow. I really appreciate all of the outreach that you've had to the various customers. Just great work. At this time, I'm not interested in raising our water rates, given our COVID situation and the really incredible stress of many of our residents that are under right now. So I'm just not interested in it right now. I know we have a large balance in our water coffers, and we have for many years, but I feel like we need to spend down our balance before raising our rates. And just hope that you'll take that into consideration when we think about all of our many residents that are under just incredible stress. So once again, thanks for the thorough presentation. I really appreciate all your hard work, and you're doing a fantastic job. And I really also appreciate the transparency. Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. I've got Councilmember Cubie next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Terry and staff, Tara and all the rest for this data-heavy presentation, which is so well communicated. Thank you for that. And so, for the past 2 cycles, we've skipped the second-year rate increase, which has added pressure to our cost recovery model. And we can see that from the data provided. And I want to note a couple things. First of all, that we sometimes hear this argument that multifamily somehow that apartment dwellers pay less into the system. And I'm glad to see the data that shows that multifamily imposes less cost to the system and they actually pay more. So as you say, they're over recovered. I do want to ask a question about flood irrigation. Can you explain to our viewers at home? We are looking to always recoup 50% of the cost. And we understand that the water is owned by the flood irrigation recipients. It's the infrastructure that we maintain. Can you explain why you recommend maintaining the 50% cost recovery percentage for flood irrigation customers?
Well, we're recommending maintaining the level that council adopted during the last study. What we're seeing is, of course, like with anything else within the water industry, we're seeing some increases in costs. We're seeing some increases in terms of just basic commodities and other things. But this program is somewhat unique in what we do provide. You're correct. The water itself is not our water. We don't charge the customers who are on our system, but we perform an operational and maintenance component to it. So again, the recovery, even though the percentage is fairly high, it's a fairly minimal impact to return to the level of 50% that was adopted at the last water rate study. So our recommendation in terms of that would be to achieve that. And anything beyond that would be at the will of council. So.
Oh, thanks, Terry. And you had explained, and Mr. Mayor, if I could continue, you had explained that to me too, that there could be some unforeseen consequences if there was an attempt to get higher than 50%, and that we could start to lose customers, and that might mean infrastructure issues and costs that would accrue to the city in other ways. And so I understand that. I just was hoping to hear that, so hear more about that. So thank you so much. So I just want to, in contrast to what Councilmember Adams said, we delayed our, council voted on rate increases, and we did delay them for the past 2 cycles, the second year of that cycle. And we can, you've shown clearly that we really need to be responsible, fiscally responsible, and to increase by over 5% is, I believe, necessary. I am sympathetic to Councilmember Adams' concern about those that, in times of COVID can't afford, might not be able to afford any water bill, let alone an increase. And I know, like other utilities, that the city of Tempe has had a moratorium for those in need. And can you tell us what the options are for assisting those whose bills are going to come due whenever that term of moratorium ends? What assistance programs are available for residents who are in need? And with that, I'll relinquish my time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Kuby. I can't answer that question directly in terms of what relief is available. Most of those types of relief programs come from external sources or external resources. But as far as the moratorium itself, I believe we're still in the moratorium, as are many of the Valley cities and much of the country. We haven't made a decision yet to sort of revisit our delinquent accounts and that sort of thing. But in terms of when that ultimate day comes, where we do start expecting certain groups of our customers to begin paying their utility bills again, there are resources out there, but from a water fund perspective and from within our enterprise itself, that doesn't exist necessarily. It would be something that would most likely have to come from another organization or somewhere else within the city.
Mayor, this is Ken, if I may comment on that.
Yes, please, Ken.
Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. So from our customer service perspective, when we have customers who can't pay their bills, we have very flexible and accommodating payment plans that we provide. So although we are not by state statute allowed to waive fees, which is considered a gift, we are able to put customers on payment plans that they agree with that they can do, and we're very flexible and accommodating when it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councilmember Kuby, go ahead.
I was just offering thanks and gratitude.
Never anything wrong with a little bit of gratitude in this world. Thank you, Councilmember Kuby. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, guys. Very thorough. I know that obviously going to these discussions, just not a fun thing when you talk about cost of recovery and possible increases in your bills. But I think with what we have in front of us and what you're laying out for our community to actually get educated more on, we're doing our reach outs to our neighborhoods. We're going to get some input and we're going to get some feedback. So I'm curious on the feedback. I will wait to hear what that says. I understand Councilmember Adams' concerned about the cost increase on this time with COVID. So with that said, with the proposal you guys are putting in front of us, obviously, I would like to hear what that feedback would be like if we implemented this in January or in July, or even somewhere in between, knowing that there's a possibility we might be coming around the corner, hopefully with COVID, who knows. But I think it's important that we gauge that response. And then when we're going to gear up our presentation on this to make our determination, I think we'll be better educated in the process. I like how you guys laid it out. I like how it's sensible. for, I think, our community to absorb and to really make a logical decision on what is in front of them. Obviously, you can see by some of the data that some of the impacts maybe more the commercial and industrial areas versus the single family or multifamily has some. But I think all that stuff's going to get weighed out well. And the long and short of it is we do need to be ahead of the game. We're a growing city. We're growing downtown. We need to conserve water. We need to continue those programs. We need to incentivize those areas that can conserve better than some, and really just kind of nurture this process. So I'm looking forward to the feedback. I'll hold off my opinions till I get that. I'm just curious on what the feedback may be between the January or July start date. I would not entertain anything after July. I would have to probably say July would be my latest. I would implement the plan if we had to go that way, but I'd probably be in more favor of January, just to make sure that we're not spending down the fund balance too much. I know we could a little bit, but in addition to that, with what we're seeing now and these days, I'm waiting for the next surprise. So I'll just wait for my hear for those comments from those neighbors, and we'll go ahead and have that discussion at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Terry, I've got a couple of questions on my end. So I definitely hear what everyone's saying. I mean, Councilmember Adams, I understand her perspective of, the concern with COVID-19 and with so many people who are either unemployed or underemployed during this time period, that, any additional cost on top of what they're already incurring from just their normal everyday expenses can be a huge burden. At the same time, I also recognize Councilmember Cubey's concern that, in the past, we've delayed these rate increases. And the question, of course, is how long can we continue to do that from a fiscal standpoint and continue to be fiscally responsible as it pertains to our fund balance, which I think is what she and Councilmember Navarro were also kind of highlighting. My quick two questions are can you remind me again, if this goes into effect starting in January, what would be the average cost per Tempe homeowner?
Let me go back if we can still see my. Let's see.
Even if you have a ballpark, I'll take the ballpark.
I do, but I'll give you more precise. Okay, so this. Thank you, Mayor. So this graph, if you can still see this, these two graphs indicate on the left what we would typically call our average customer. So this would be a customer with a.
You need to reshare your monitor, please.
Oh, I thought we were still sharing it. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No worries. We can see you, not the graph.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect. There you go.
Okay. So this graph on the left is what we would consider a typical Tempe customer. This is a customer with a 5/8 inch meter, 10,000 gallons of water use a month. So this is the bill currently is about $55 per month. And with the proposed change, we'd be looking at about a little under $59 per month. This is, again, typical. But we wanted to also indicate what it would look like for what we call a large volume customer. So this would be a customer with a 1 inch meter, 50,000 gallons of water. So they're functioning they're using water in a different tier typically. And again, the increase itself is not significant and we're still below the average, but they would be looking at about a little over $12, $13 more per month. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. So 12, 13, so we're talking about probably about $150 more a year at that number. Okay. And the other question is, I guess probably getting back to a little bit of Councilmember Cubey and a little bit of Councilmember Navarro's questions. If we delay this and we don't implement this in January of 2021, and perhaps Terry, you can comment on this, maybe Ken as well, what will be the financial hit we will take at the city? Because my whole thing is, as much as I don't ever want to burden our residents with an additional water increase, especially during these very trying and challenging and uncertain times, I also want to make sure that we're not bankrupting the city in some way we're going to have a hard time climbing out of.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say that the impact, like I mentioned in one of the slides, is we're in a very favorable position relative to our fund balance. So we've got a little bit of latitude. That being said, the risk is the further out you go without addressing revenue requirement that is being identified, it ends up with a later increase that's more significant than what the levelized increase at the current time would be. So we completely understand and feel the same way, frankly, that it's a difficult one because it's the worst timing possible to have to add to someone's monthly expenses. But on the other hand, we know that it's a little hard to say with exact certainty what's going to happen. We just know that we know for certain that the fund balance will diminish because we already include some use of fund balance within this rate study. So some is already built in that we'll use some of it. As we reduce that number, we can use that fund balance to make up for what we're not collecting in revenues, but over time it will be down below some level, and you really don't have an issue until you have an issue, and that would be if we had some more unforeseen circumstance where something happened within our infrastructure, one of our facilities, where we had a cost that really impacted our revenue or impacted our fund balance. Sorry, and so that's kind of you're weighing out these different things. I wouldn't say that I don't want to give you any sort of a doomsday scenario to tell you that, if we did that, we're trying to be as transparent as possible and say, this is what a levelized is always sort of a moderate approach to take. It's something that if you take this approach over time, it's less impactful than what could be considered, like I mentioned in the presentation, rate spiking, which is definitely more impactful. You saw some of the huge rate spikes, and we've seen them in other places too. So that's sort of the balancing act that we turn to all of you for that sort of guidance on what level of risk we're willing to accept.
So basically, I'm going to go to Councilmember Adams right after this. I just want to make one other quick comment. So basically, what you're saying is, for what I'm picking up is a couple of things. One is that we could choose to, if we do an incremental rate increase now, it's the kind of thing that people may be able to absorb and might not. Not saying that people aren't going to notice. I think people, especially in this kind of time, will notice any kind of rate increase, but it will be less. Not impact, but I would say less shocking than if we choose to hold off again for another, let's say, 12 months, and then we implement it. And at that point, when it does go into effect, it's going to be something that people are going to immediately notice because the jump is going to be sharp in nature. And secondly, you're saying that if but we do have a healthy enough fund balance. So if we did choose to do this, we probably could, barring any kind of major doomsday scenario. Our fund balance is healthy enough that if we chose to delay it another few months just to see where COVID kind of, how it plays out, we probably could do that, and we're not putting the city in grave danger, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. That's exactly what I was driving at.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Woods. And I just kind of wanted to clarify my position. Perhaps I wasn't that clear before. I'm not interested in not raising our water rates forever if we need to do that. I mean, obviously, the fiscal responsibility is very important to me. And so I just think that right now, with the situation with COVID, I would rather delay it a little while and see if we can get a little bit better handle on COVID and where we're going with this in our country. I really do believe that we need to conserve water and continue very aggressive outreach programs and for educating our residents on best practices. So I know our water department has been doing that, and so maybe even looking at increasing it even more if there's other items that you can think of to conserve water and educate our residents. I know that when we met, Terry, I didn't get the impression that this was an emergency situation to raise our rates. So I guess that's where I'm coming from on it, and certainly clarify if I'm incorrect on it. So that's just where I am, and maybe Terry, if you could clarify that.
Thank you, Council Member. You're correct. We're not in any sort of an emergency situation. It's just as we were discussing previously. It's sort of a decision that has to be made that we will have an impact. We recognize that we're in a favorable position, but we will certainly diminish our fund balance. But given the impact of that, it depends on other circumstances that aren't completely foreseeable. But again, the rate study looks at in terms of what's in the best financial interest of the utility itself, and also it's sort of built into the equation to avoid the spiking. Now, that's not even to say that's necessarily the case with a minor delay. But again, we don't know what we don't know, but we have a very well-run utility. We have a very well-run city. And so we make a lot of really good decisions so that we don't have a lot of unforeseen circumstances. So I would say you're very accurate in what you described, and this is simply what the study is recommending. And this is, like I said, a pretty moderate approach to what we might consider as an organization.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification, Terry. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Just a really quick thing too, Terry. So just trying to, just from a chronology standpoint, if we go out to do the public outreach, approximately when would that start and how long would that take? I'm just trying to kind of play this out from a month-by-month standpoint.
Sure. We actually started the process back in March. So we actually had we formed our stakeholder group. We had our first public webinar where we talked about the process itself. And then up until now, we've had several stakeholder meetings. So that group is concluded as we went through the actual rate study process. So we met with the stakeholder groups. They gave input. We gathered that input. We've received a lot of other input on our rate study webpage. So we've included that in our documents and what we'll provide additionally to council as we move forward. And then immediately following this meeting is we'll start collecting public comment via comment cards, but also we've got our next public webinar next week. We've got 2 presentations to 2 of the commissions coming up both that week and the following week. And then I think we have a couple other things within our, some sort of outreach efforts and things like that. So there's quite a bit, and it just it's sort of a continuum as we move. This process itself is about a 9-month process. So
okay, so 9-month process that started in March. So you think it should probably conclude, I'm guessing, roughly around the end of this calendar year?
Yes, sir. We'll come to council for consideration of adoption in December. We're on the calendar for that.
Okay. So it sounds good to me. So I just, I'm going to go to Councilmember QB, but one quick thing I'm going to say is that it seems to me that what we could probably do, given that you're still in the process of conducting public outreach and you've been talking to people since March of this year, it seems like, kind of going back to Councilmember Navarro's comments, we likely don't need to make a decision about this tonight. The input from council was certainly very, informative about, what direction we might want to go in. But it seems like we don't need to make a firm decision this evening. We can wait for the public comment to come back and council wait for staff to bring that public comment so we get full input from our residents. And at that point in December of this year, we can make a final decision. That's going to be my recommendation, but I want to go to Councilmember QB first, then I can come back around after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to circle back, and we've not had a water increase since 2018, and 2019, 2020 there were no increases, even though they were voted on and all. But rate increases are never easy, and they're rarely popular with residents. The councils have made those difficult decisions in the past. Is it really fair to leave a sharp rate increase to future councils? Are we to wait for an emergency for a fund balance before we act? And I know we make difficult decisions all the time. And, I would just urge when we do talk to residents that we look for ways. I realize because of the gift clause, we can't necessarily directly benefit people, but we could look for ways that we could help agencies like our CAP agency to get more utility assistance out to people, and that we consider the need that's out there in the community, because it is great. And Councilmember Adams, you're so right about that. But I just wanted to add those words that these are the difficult decisions we make as council members, and we need to be mindful that these decisions have been made in the past and will be made in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember QB. So with that being said, unless I don't see any other hands from council, my recommendation would be to the council, provided they don't have any objection. Actually, I see Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Let me let her speak, and then I will come back.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I liked where you were going with that. I think it's really good to get some more for public input so we can make a pretty informed decision. I just want some clarity really quick too. So Terry, so to the T's, I would say, I know you guys worked really hard on this presentation, and I'm so glad we had an opportunity to hear it beforehand, because I can't tell you how many times I stared at those graphs trying to figure it out. But I think you guys did a really great job trying to bring that information together, and I appreciate anybody that's going to take the time to try to understand what we're trying to do, and then just really fulfill our policy of what we've always said about cost recovery and how important that is. So I just want to make it clear, when you go back to your rate study recommendations, which is like slide number 9, and you don't have to pull that up, but it requires a 5.5% revenue increase, and that 5.5%, is that year to year for the next 10 years? So every year we expect it to go up 5.5%, 5.5%, and so on.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's correct. The water rate study looks at what a levelized rate increase annually over the projection period would be. So the projection period in our case, as we look at expenses and costs and revenue requirements, is 10 years. So the rate study basically says if you want to maintain your reserve fund balance and collect the necessary revenues to account for costs, given the inflationary nature of costs in the wastewater and wastewater industry, and still be at the policy level, that rate increase annually would be 5.5%. So the choice of, the only thing that is a sort of a factor in that is if you made a decision to, for example, if we made a decision to postpone, or if that decision was made, then you might see a slightly different level of increase required in the levelized increase over the next 10 years. So presumably, unless you were going to draw down intentionally your reserve fund more quickly than you would typically, you would have to account for that difference somewhere, when that typically is made up in a slightly higher rate increase. But I think in one of the slides we indicated, it's not a significant increase, but it shows sort of a steady increase over time because the costs don't tend to decrease. We see this level of like I said, inflationary increase that is sort of a cost of doing business. So what that's showing is if you instituted a 5.5% rate increase on January of 2021, then you would stay, in the projection at least, you would stay at or above your fund balance policy. It would draw down slowly over time over the 10-year period, but you would not drop below that level.
Okay, so when we look at the single family monthly bill comparison to other cities, that's only taking into consideration next year, if it goes up for 1 year, correct?
Yeah, that's just the 1 year. That's correct. Yes.
Right. So we have no idea where we're going to compare if we go down that trajectory, right? What that's going to look like. Just
that's correct. I'm sorry.
Right. No, you're fine. It's all good. I just want to make sure we're clear on what this is saying for the future.
If I may, council member, I would just add that the other thing we don't know for certain is that, you know, the other cities also are facing very similar. They have almost identical cost pressures as we do. We have slightly different systems and, you know, the age of infrastructure and customer characteristics and what types, but almost certainly many, if not all, of these other communities will also have some level of pressure to make an adjustment to their revenues over time. So, you know, it seems logical that if we kind of carried it out over the years, we could presume, unless we did something dramatic, which we're certainly not requesting, we would probably stay about in that, you know, that average sort of range, I would imagine, versus other communities in the valley.
Yeah, I saw that too in your background information. So I think that's super helpful to kind of see when they took a rate increase and how long it's been for some of them, longer than I for sure. So I think that's super helpful. I guess, you know, Mayor, moving forward, you know, I agree with you. Maybe getting some more of that public input would be really helpful. And I know it's going to happen. I know we're going to have to make some rate changes, and I understand that. I think I would like to get some weigh in as to when that would be the best. As you said, it's probably January, but, you know, being that we're in COVID times, I feel like I want to be flexible. And $150 is $150 that really could make or break somebody. And this is a necessity. This is something that people have to have. And I want to make sure that, you know, everybody has the opportunity to get the necessities that they need for their families. So, and then I guess my last question, and maybe Terry, this could be in a Friday packet or something. I would just kind of like to know what our water usage is, and, you know, maybe how it's transitioned over the last, you know, year with all the outreach that we've been doing. But that's something that we can get at a later date. So anyway, thank you guys so very much for the presentation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Next up is Councilmember Garland.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Terry, I just wanted to say thank you to your department. I think the stakeholder groups are a fabulous idea. And I love that you have done that outreach and that we're going to continue to do that outreach. And I would just have to say, for me personally, you know, I live on a larger lot. So rate increases, you know, of water, I I just cringe when I think about it. But, you know, it'd be the easiest for me to be able to say that, you know, I don't want to make that increase or, you know, put it off for a while, but I just don't think that that's the right thing, trying to do my, you know, fiduciary duty to the city. Corey, I'm open to what plan you were going to set forth, but I just want to say, Terry, I just think you guys have done a great job, and I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to echo some of the comments from my colleagues. You know, certainly more public input is always better. You know, my preference would be the January 1st rate increase, only because, you know, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to spend down our savings right now, given the situation that we're in. And I also worry about a subsequent larger increase if we end up having to delay it, which would be even more hurtful to our residents. And, you know, Councilmember Kuby is right that we have previously voted on and delayed this rate increase. So I think when you do stuff like that, you know, eventually there has to come a time when we move forward with it. And I know it's hard and some people won't like it, but I agree with Councilmember Garland that I think it's in the best interest of our city to move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. So it sounds like, you know, from what I'm gathering here, the consensus of the council is, you know, there are a couple of folks who've talked about, you know, wanting to maybe hold off a little bit. A couple of folks who've also talked about wanting to potentially move forward with an incremental increase. I think, you know, what I was trying to lay out earlier is that I think that given the fact that we don't have to make the decision until roughly December, when the public input process will have concluded, and Terry can come back and give us another presentation at that point, it sounds like then council can make the decision about whether or not to either completely hold off for now on doing any kind of rate increase, or potentially implement an incremental increase that would take place starting in January of 2021. But it seems like what the best thing we can do right now is wait for the additional public comment to come back so we know what our residents think, and then we can figure out exactly where we want to go. Councilmember Kuby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And following up on what Councilmember Adams said, as part of this, could we have maybe it's a Friday packet and maybe it's also presented to the public, but can we list the agencies that provide utility assistance, such as help with a water bill, and what opportunities are available for people? Can that be part of what is returned to us in December?
We can look into that, Councilmember. Thank you. We'll look into that and see what we can provide. And if we can get that sort of nailed down, we'll do it either via Friday packet or do it when we return to council in December. Thank you.
Yeah, no rush. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you, Councilmember Kuby. All right, sounds like we have consensus then. You know, Terry, thank you very much. It looks like what we'll do is we'll wait for you to conclude the public input process from our residents and come back in December, and we will then make a final decision about what to do, whether it's option A, which is to, you know, delay the increase sort of indefinitely until we feel that it's an appropriate time to go forward, or B, to go forward with an incremental increase that would start in January of 2021. But, you know, just for once again, the public watching, we're going to wait to make that decision in December once we get all your feedback. So with that said, Terry, I think we're good.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for all your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next up here, we've got item 2B, which is the Tempe Service Line Protection Program Update and Direction, otherwise known as SLIP. And I'm going to call upon staff to make a presentation.
Hi, Mayor, members of the council. This is Marilyn DeRosa, your engineering and transportation director. And we're going to talk about SLIP for just about 10 minutes. SLIP is a pilot financial assistance program for water and sewer service lines that was started a number of years ago. Throughout its 9-year life, Wendy Springborn, our engineering services manager, who will be presenting tonight, has managed and administered the program. After operating for the last several years, we thought it appropriate to come back to council, provide an update, and based on some of the lessons learned, at the end, Wendy will be making providing you with some options for program administration, alternatives, and changes. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Wendy Springborn.
Thank you, Marilyn. Let me get my screen shared here. And there we go. Okay. Well, thank you all. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Wendy Springborn. I'm the Engineering Services Manager, as well as the SLIP Manager since the start of the program. And we're just going to do a kind of a brief overview of where we're at now and get some direction as far as where we go from here. This program predated any of the strategic priorities that were initiated with council. So what we decided to do, we took a look at what was currently on the book, so to speak, and we came up with the closest connection. Let's see if this will go forward now. There we go. And we decided to tie it to quality of life at 3.36 and achieving ratings of very satisfied or satisfied in comparison with the top 10 or within equal to or greater than or equal to the top 10% of the national benchmark cities measured in the community survey. So since we have some new people on council, I wanted to give a quick history of the program and overview. So the Service Line Protection Program, it is a financial assistance program that offers up to $5,000 for repair and or replacement of the water service line and the sewer service line. So this picture shows you that the water service line is from the meter to where it connects outside of the house. It does not include any irrigation, just the service line. And the sewer service line is from where it connects outside of the house to where it connects to the main sewer line for the neighborhood. So depending upon, it could be in an alley or in the street. What most residents don't understand is that they are responsible for that whole run of the service line, even the portion that goes off into the right-of-way. It does not cover anything inside or under the house. So early in 2011, we were approached by a third-party vendor who offered this type of program or would have offered this type of program to our residents. And after much discussion, we decided, well, you know what, let's do it in-house. We'll go ahead and take this program on. We chose to enter into a pilot program for the SLIP program. Again, financial assistance. It costs $12 a month to cover both water and sewer service lines. Up to $5,000 for each line is available in a 12-month period. And it was hoped that we would be able to generate revenue for the general fund through this program, but at a minimum, the program would be cost neutral. So we started out, there were 23,000 eligible households. We wanted to choose a limited number just because there were so many unknowns with the program. So it's focused on single family owner occupied only. No rentals, no commercial properties were to be involved in the program. There would be a 30-day wait period before service is eligible. In that way, somebody could have a problem in the morning, sign up for SLIP in the afternoon, and then expect service the next day. So that's why you have to sign up and wait 30 days before service was available. And it was really focused on an active problem with your service lines. You know, a leak in the front yard, your toilet gurgles when it flushes, you've got slow drains or it's backing up in the shower, versus a preventative maintenance program where just because you have old pipes, the program is not meant to then come in and just replace your pipes. We also knew at the beginning that we would have to contract for some of the services. Initially, we hired a telemarketing company to do the outreach to the prospective 23,000 eligible households. We just didn't have the manpower nor the expertise in doing that kind of outreach. So telemarketing company was brought on board. And then we also knew that we did not have the expertise nor would even understand how to staff something like this, just because the number of requests were going to be unknown. So we contracted with 3 plumbers in the very beginning. And then at the start of the program, within engineering, we had our private development team that did inspections for the right-of-way repairs and that type of thing, while community development, building safety focused on the on-property inspections. But several years ago, that team left engineering and was combined into community development. So the only part that's really being administered by engineering right now is the administration of the program overall. And because of that, when we were part of Public Works, if there were ever shortfalls in revenues to cover the expenses, the overage of costs would be covered by the department through our operating funds. And now that we're split off, engineering transportation currently, as it's structured, is responsible for any costs that overrun the revenues. So as of the end of this past fiscal year, we have over 4,900 enrollees, which is about 21% enrollment. We've had over 1,700 service requests. Average repairs are still remaining pretty constant, about 1,700 for water service lines and between 3,700 and 4,700 for sewer service lines. And we predominantly do repairs for the sewer versus water. After each service request, we send a survey out, and we've received a little over 26% back. Overwhelming positive feedback from the residents, and basically they were just happy that there was a program that they could fall or have available should they need it in this type of situation. So the current financial status, total revenue, we generated a little over 5 million since the start of the program. And then the total expenses is a little over 4.9 million. But that's without looking at the full cost of the program. Those are just direct expenses for permits, for the contracted plumbers, any marketing materials, that type of thing. But we never really took a hard look at the indirect costs associated with the program. But also around this time, we've had several requests to expand the program. However, we recognize that the program had some shortcomings in its current configuration, like terms and condition loopholes, just not as clearly defined, and just underfunding of the program. So before we considered even looking at expansions, we wanted to make sure to take a critical look at the program as it exists today. So we reached out to the audit office to ask them if they could just do a little consulting review to help us kind of wrap our arms around the program as a whole. And there were three key areas that we asked them to look at. What other cities, if you look at comparable cities to Tempe, what other cities are doing a program like this? If they could help us get a true understanding of what the full cost of the program was. And then also touch base with the attorney's office just to make sure and assess that there aren't any legal issues that we're looking at right now with the way the program is configured. So after all that, the audit office was able to come back to us and show that if we really looked at the comprehensive cost of the program, we're really looking at about 6.1 million, which shows us then at a 1.1 million deficit since the start of the program. This next slide shows a chart as far as how we looked at the end of every fiscal year. That orange line that you see is the number of requests we received for that particular fiscal year. Now, the deficits that we experience are both the hard costs of what it took to pay the plumbers and marketing materials and inspections, that type of thing. But then also it does include the indirect costs associated, which includes the direct labor of the personnel involved with the program, vehicle usage, and indirect allocation costs. Now, one of the things that it's just such an unknown is that we do not know or cannot anticipate how many calls for service we're going to get every year, let alone the type of repairs that we are going to be required to make. So there is just a lot of unknowns with this program moving forward. And so we just need that to be taken into consideration. Now, part of the review or the results from the audit review was that they looked at 30 comparable cities were surveyed, and they found that 11 had similar programs. However, those similar programs really, they all contracted with a third-party provider for the service. The National League of Cities is probably the most well-known and The company has been reaching out to me since they saw this on our agenda about wanting to talk to us about what they could offer. But there were 3 local municipalities that offer both the water and sewer service coverage through this third party. And you can see from this chart what the average monthly fee is for the resident for each of the 3 cities, Avondale, Mason, Phoenix. And then looking at all 11 programs, averaging between, $8.50 a month up to close to $15 a month. And then what the annual revenue that the cities were able to obtain from that third-party provider contract, ranging from either they got $0 revenue in for the program on up to $380,000. The results did show that we did have a cumulative cost that exceeded revenue by 1.1 million. And they did voice concern that there's still a significant risk of insufficient revenues in the future, depending upon the contracted expenses that I explained before. So moving forward, there were 3 results or recommendations that they had expressed. One is for us to really consider the benefits versus risks of keeping it in-house versus looking at a third-party vendor to provide the services for our residents. Really, if we keep it in-house, evaluate the optimal assignment, consider moving the administration of the program if it was deemed beneficial. And then prior to any material changes that we would do for the program is to conduct a full legal review of the program to make sure that there aren't any legal concerns that are hanging out there. So with that, as far as our next steps and looking for council directions, we're really putting forward 3 options for you to consider. The first one is to issue a request for a proposal, and that would be going directly out into the market and negotiating through an RFP, a third-party provider to do the same service for our residents that we are doing in-house. Option 2 would be to issue a request for information. And in doing that, we'd be able to get a little bit more defined information potentially to be able to put together maybe a stronger RFP going out, but we'd be able to get identify costs and service levels, as well as looking at what the satisfaction history has been with them providing that service. And anecdotally, in talking with the auditor I worked with, she was able to discern that the cities who utilized this third-party vendor was very pleased with the service that was being provided and the outcomes that they were achieving. Now, if we go with option 3 and continue to use it as an in-house program, first step would be to conduct a full legal review to make sure, assess any legal concerns. But we definitely would need to update the terms and conditions, identify the best department to handle the program moving forward, as well as calculate any appropriate fee increases to assist with the underfunding. So with that, that concludes the presentation, and we'll accept any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you so much, Wendy. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to kind of give an overview of my opinion on this. I was in Public Works when we started this program, and I was never in favor of it because I didn't think the city should get into the insurance business. I'm really happy that the audit department came in and gave us the real story about the true cost of this program, because that's so important to know what we're really dealing with. So hats off to the audit department for doing that. That being said, I don't believe we should take it away from our residents, and I recommend contracting it out. Therefore, I'm in support of option 1, so we can get into the private sector while still providing the benefit to our residents. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Adams. Councilmember Cubie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Adams. I thank you, Wendy, for identifying, and for the audit group of identifying a possible savings, maybe even $1 million to the city. That is tremendous. And I would also very much in favor of sending this out for RFP and doing that as quickly as possible. I just had a couple questions. One is, do we know how many times we have more than one request from from a resident, like especially in the Orangeburg Pike neighborhood? Is it generally somebody has this problem happen, they get it fixed, and then they're good? Or is this a continual problem they would have?
Go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. So basically, one of the items in the terms and conditions is that if Orangeburg is identified, that whole line has to be replaced at that time because there really is no fixing Orangeburg. So as part of being part of the program, if you have Orangeburg and end up having to use the program, we would have to come in and replace the whole line. But there have been times that residents use both the water service repair as well as the sewer service repair, and or eventually may end up having the problem in alley or street, depending upon the neighborhood. So the slip would still work for them as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Hey, Wendy, good to see you.
Good to hear you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Just look at my picture up there. It's much better than mine. I totally appreciate this program. I remember when we implemented it, and I know everybody was pretty excited about being able to offer really cool service for our residents. And because of that Orangeburg that you mentioned, that was definitely an issue with a lot of these older homes. I got just a couple of questions. I'm wondering now, at the time, being in the insurance world, like homeowners insurance weren't offering this type of coverage, but now they do. And I'm wondering, do you still see an increase of people wanting to be part of the SLIP program? And then once they make a claim, do they stay part of the SLIP program?
So, it varies, resident by resident, but you are correct. When we first started the program, the insurance companies were not offering it as a rider for the homeowners. And those are conversations that I have with the residents when they call in or asking questions about whether they should get into the program or not. But the, it can vary as far as, I have people that have repairs and keep staying in because we've taken care of one of the service lines, but not both. So they want to just have that extra, assurance that they've got some assistance available to them, as well as, if they end up having to do any type of repair in the right of way, that can get costly as well. So the slip has been there, but we definitely do have, we've had residents that, they get in, they're in for a couple of months, they have a problem, and then a year later, which is we require currently that they have to stay in 12 months after the repair is done before they can cancel. So we have those, as well as ones that they have the repair done and then all of a sudden they're selling their house. So there's no way for us to, force them to pay a year's worth of fees when that happens.
Oh, yeah, I get that. I didn't realize that 12 months was after.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the SLIP program. I think it's great. I just don't think I don't think we want to put a new program on our plate for us to do in-house. So I would support trying to go out for an RFP, but make sure it does stay cost neutral. I do think this is something that's a great benefit to our residents. And I honestly think sometimes we're going to do a better job of customer service than maybe some others, but I think that as long as it stays cost neutral and we're able to do it in the best way that we can for the residents, we should go down that route. So that would be my choice. And I would also explore the possibility of thinking about including rentals. I know you said we have excluded them. I guess I would just like you maybe to just dig into that a little bit more. I'm not saying do it or not do it, just, maybe explore that option and see, because maybe that's another way for us to be connected with a rental homeowner. So just looking for connections and ways that we can build relationships as we're having some issues with, some of those rentals, that this might be a really good way for us to, build that relationship with them. So that's my two. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Don't see their hands at the moment. I would say too that my preference as well is to contract this out, just because I think it's a wonderful program, as everyone's talked about. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our engineering department is able to spend their time and effort on other things. And so I think the best thing to do in this situation would be to contract the program out. And I think that Councilmember Arredondo Savage's suggestion is a good one, given the fact that we are talking about potentially doing an RFP. Why not explore the idea of also expanding it to rentals if we're talking about maybe working with a private company? So with that said, that's my preference. I'm going to go to Councilmember Garland.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. As being a new council member, I liked the history and the detail that you gave. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I agree with Robin and Corey, and just thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I too would recommend looking at the renters and giving them the opportunity to get the service as long as we contract it out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. All right, so it sounds like we've got consensus on this item. I'll go ahead and turn my camera back on here. So it sounds like we're going to talk about actually going out for RFP to potentially work with a private company to administer the SLIP program moving forward, but also with the additional kind of add of seeing if we can possibly work with rental properties as well. So I think that's the direction. I think Wendy and Marilyn, anything else that you need from us?
No, option one, and we'll move forward.
Wonderful. So much. Thank you so much for all your hard work and for the presentation.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Next up here, we have item number 2C, which is the long-term transit fund plan. Madam Clerk, I believe we have a comment card for this item, correct? Or Alex, do we have a comment card for this item?
According to Carla, we do. Carla, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
I'm on now. Yes, we do. We have one item submitted by Mr. Sokolowski, resident of Tempe, and I'll have that up here momentarily. He writes, there is a strong case why we should prioritize public transportation funding. It's essential for Tempe's long-term success to find new funding from advertising, real estate development, general funding, and other sources to continue to support and expand our public transportation. Reducing transit service should be a last resort when all other options have been exhausted. The COVID crisis demonstrated that public transportation is an essential service for workers, seniors, and people with disabilities. Cutting transit services will put us on the wrong path in regards to air pollution and public safety. I'm also concerned there could be an economic backfire. Reduced transit service can reduce commuters' access to employment, but can also impact businesses that rely on riders to succeed. I hope the council will immediately and aggressively work to protect transit funding, not just so that we preserve the environment that has led to a development project like cul-de-sac, but to provide reliable, high-quality service to all residents. One option is to recover lost fare revenue. I tested the Pass to Go app, and it's basic, but it's functional. Even if we consider raising ticket prices, it would be limited by our ability to maintain fare boxes. Instead, the app can display a green screen that the driver can verify from 6 feet away and wouldn't need to verify reduced fare eligibility. We would consider if there is a cost-effective way to begin recuperating lost fare revenue due to maintenance issues, rear door boarding, and reduced fare abuse. That's the closing.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go now call upon staff to make a presentation.
Hi again, Mayor and members of council. This is Marilyn DeRosa again, and thank you for your direction on the previous item. With respect to this presentation, as you know, the Transit Fund is projected to experience some financial challenges over the next couple of years. This is the first of a series of presentations our transit staff will be providing to council as we work through possible service changes. Eric Iverson, our transit manager, and Sam Stevenson, our senior transportation planner will walk through a framework for those changes and some of the first places we'd like to begin focusing our effort. With that, I'll turn it over to Eric and Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Can everyone hear me? This is Eric Iverson, and I think Greg Wolf is putting up the presentation for us. As Marilyn said, and thank you, Mayor Woods and members of the council. As Marilyn, our director, mentioned, we are here tonight to present information and kind of the first of a series of presentations on balancing our transit fund in the long term, and then related transit service changes that would be coming along with that. Next slide. So these are the strategic priority performance measures that this effort, overall effort attaches to, aligns with, the 20-minute city and our transit satisfaction survey. Next slide. And then just to give you kind of run a show, we'll go through a little bit of history of how what the program has done in the last 24 years, as well as the current status of the fund, the COVID-19 impacts of late, the long-term kind of structural health of the fund and getting it to a sustainable level, some of the specific short-term proposed transit service reductions, and then we are asking for feedback tonight. We're asking for support or direction on the 3-year timeline that we are proposing, as well as any feedback you have on the framework for how we go about this process. Next slide. So a little bit of background. You're all familiar. The community is very familiar. We did pass, Tempe residents passed a transit tax in 1996. There's an image of the ballot language here on the slide. It's a non-sunsetting half-cent sales tax that gives us dedicated funding for all the multimodal improvements that everyone's familiar with that is really citywide. So that's our public transit system, a lot of our streetscape, bicycle pedestrian programs. We do leverage that transit tax with, it's augmented with federal and regional Proposition 400 monies. And then just want to characterize that time period in 1996 as having very limited transit service, virtually no pathways in the city, and really limited bicycle facilities as well. Next slide. And this is what our program looks like today. We have been successful in instituting and expanding service to 26, soon to be 27 public transit routes citywide. We have full city coverage. This includes obviously the light rail system, all of our express routes, the orbit system, and all of our ADA and paratransit services citywide also. Next slide. The fund also contributes to and is the primary funding source for all of our multi-use paths that total nearly 40 miles along our canal system and riverways citywide. We have nearly 200 miles of bike lanes that have been added in those 24 years, contributes to the grid bike share program, and then of course the recharacterization of many of our arterial streets to make them more multimodal and give transportation options for everyone on those streets. And then the fund has also, working with Proposition 400 monies and with federal funds, we have been able to build the Tempe Transportation Center in downtown, and also the East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility, which is one of two and really the primary operations center for our East Valley bus service. The fund also, of course, supports our Youth Transit Pass program for children in Tempe, all of the bus infrastructure and amenities related to our transit shelters and bus stops, our entire fleet, which is almost all entirely alternatively fueled. And then we want to mention that our contract for operating all of our service, our rail and bus service, was operated through primarily through Tempe until 2013. And then we are under contract with Valley Metro until 2023, the end of fiscal year 2023, for operating that service. We feel like the investments that have been made in through the transit tax have resulted in a lot of success. We are now, Tempe is the highest per capita transit ridership city in the region, and we also have the highest bicycle commute percent in the region. So we feel like that's a sign of the success of what the investments have been made. We are, however, at build out with our system. We've largely fulfilled what we have said we would do in the ballot language of the transit tax. And so we're an O&M fund now. We're not an expansion fund, we're an O&M fund. That's how we would characterize it. I know that we did a presentation last year to council to kind of share that characterization. And then COVID hit. We all know what that has done to public spaces. Public transit is no exception. We just want to mention that, so while it has been a struggle, we do see, as the public comment that we received earlier that was read, we do see public transportation as a really essential service for everyone in the community and part of any economic recovery that we do go through. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a summary of what our transit fund revenues and expenditures looks like. These are the list of the revenues that we bring in annually to our fund. The lion's share of that is our transit tax. We also have, as I mentioned before, the federal monies and the regional monies, the Proposition 400 monies. That program does expire at the end of 2025. We have other real estate holdings. We have our fare box recovery, although that has been declining of late. We have had infusion of federal funds to projects like the streetcar, some of our bus purchases. And then we also, for this year, which helps us kind of float through 2021, we've had an infusion of CARES Act congressional support money in the amount of $21 million for this year. Our expenditures, as I've alluded to earlier, are largely centered around our operational contracts with Valley Metro for rail and bus service, and those total $45 million for fiscal year 21. And then we are paying for all the O&M of the facilities, the infrastructure, the pathways, all the capital investments that we have done in the last 24 years. So our challenge today, as we go forward, is that we are spending, not this year, but we are spending more than we are bringing in. We need to right-size that. We need to get our fund into a sustainable level. So right now our challenge is a 15% reduction. We are looking for 3 years to do this right-sizing of the transit fund. This is what this visually looks like. Red line is showing us outspending. The blue line are revenues. We want to share this visual, and then we do want to mention we'll keep watching this and making sure that we are making any changes in response to the economic conditions as we learn them, as we go through them. Next slide. So we have made some internal efficiencies to help alleviate the reductions that we see coming forward with our public transit system. So again, kind of referencing the public comment that we just heard, which was a great one, we want to do all sorts of internal, unseen to the public reductions and efficiencies to minimize the reductions to our public system. Council is aware that we have slowed down or stopped many of the capital projects. We are, of course, moving forward with the ones that had public federal funding or were already underway. So those are moving forward. We're looking at, COVID-influenced elimination of public events, indefinite elimination of those public events for obvious reasons. Those are a cost savings for us as well. And then we're just looking for overall personnel and staffing, creativity, and operating lean through things like not having an ad agency, but we can really rely upon our internal staffing resources to do that. We have a really strong team. We want to make sure that the council knows that we are doing these internal reductions in order to preserve and protect as much of our public transportation system as possible. And then with that, I'm going to hand it over to our senior transportation planner, Sam Stevenson, who's going to walk through some of the framework of our decision-making as well as some of the specifics about our public transit system.
Hey, thanks, Eric. So here's an overview of some of the metrics that we'll be using to help guide us through this process. We have public involvement listed here first, and due to the magnitude of this project, we think it's especially important that we start out with a community engagement strategy to help us better understand how we can recommend these service reductions while minimizing the impacts to the community. Then, we're going to marry the community's response with our analysis of available transit system data. So we monitor ridership by route, ridership by time of day, and also our cost data, because each of our modes are priced differently, so that we can weigh the costs and benefits of each of the services we provide. Equity is going to be an important consideration as well. We want to make sure that our service reductions are not adversely impacting just a single portion of our city. Further to that, since all of our services receive some level of federal funding, we're even further obligated to ensure service changes are made equitably ththrough the FDA's Title VI requirements. It's also imperative that we stay true to the spirit of the original transit tax ballot language, which the voters would have read when they supported Tempe's transit tax initiative back in 1996. And we'll be working closely with Valley Metro and our neighboring cities, through which many of our routes also travel, to coordinate efforts, as Tempe is not currently the only city anticipating service reductions. And then last but definitely not least, we'll maintain a strong and continuous level of communication with the council throughout the process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here are a few ideas we have for the near term for the next available transit service change opportunity, which happens to be April of 2021. These ideas are really what we consider to be low-hanging fruit, or recommendations from recent studies, or just based on our knowledge of how some of these routes perform. And I want to emphasize that at this point, these are all only concepts. We'll need to conduct a public outreach process and analyze results of that process before moving forward. So jumping into the list here, we propose an optimization of Route 72, which runs north and south on Scottsdale Road, but deviates from Rural Road to the Tempe Transportation Center in downtown. We're looking to propose eliminating that deviation so that the route remains on Rural Road throughout Tempe, considering the abundance of transit connections available between downtown Tempe and Rural Road. We're also proposing an optimization of our commuter express bus routes, which connect Central and South Tempe to downtown Phoenix during the peak commute times. Generally, Tempe's express routes are not meeting some of the regional standards for this type of service, and we'd like to embrace the recommendations from a recent MAG study to provide more efficient and direct service between park and ride locations in Tempe and downtown Phoenix. So in doing so, we propose a shortening of routes 521 and 522, and we'd eliminate Route 520, which, by the way, is our lowest ridership express route and one of the lowest ridership express routes in the region. We'd be consolidating the ridership from that service with Route 521. There are also a couple of local routes which serve areas that are also well served by other transit options. So we're looking to propose removing service in Tempe on Route 40, which runs on Apache Boulevard, east of the Price Road Park and Ride into Mesa. And we're also proposing to remove service in Tempe on Route 32, which connects to Arizona Mills Mall along Baseline Road from Phoenix. As I mentioned before, we're going to make sure that we coordinate closely with Valley Metro and our neighboring cities. And then finally, because rail is really one of the higher cost services that we provide, we continue to have discussions with Valley Metro about ways we can reduce operating costs for both light rail and in future, the Tempe streetcar. Slide, please. So looking beyond the near term, and as Eric mentioned, we envision this process to extend beyond the next 2 years or so. Here are some of the possible service reduction strategies and potential revenue increases that we'd like to consider and explore. It's likely that we'll need to consider service eliminations for some portions of routes, or perhaps some routes entirely. We'll also revisit our frequency and span of service for each of our modes. We hope to continue working very closely with Valley Metro through our working groups and also through the board process to continue and reduce costs wherever possible, because many of the costs that are incurred by Valley Metro are then passed through to Tempe, as well as other cities, through our current service model. We'd like to see an increase in the revenues collected through our fare collection system. We're working on a large regional project to implement a new fare collection system with mobile ticketing and smart cards. We believe this will present additional opportunities to mitigate abuse of our fare policy. Advertising on our transit system did come up at the August 20th council meeting during the presentation about transit shelters, and staff will be providing information on the pros and cons of advertising to you soon. We can also consider the implementation of fares on the Orbit system, which, as you all know, our Orbit system is currently free to ride, and we feel that that really does contribute to the success of that program. But we can further explore the costs and benefits of implementing fare on Orbit as well. It's been several years since a fare increase was implemented in the regional transit system, but this is something we can also explore with Valley Metro and neighboring cities. And then finally, the contract for our fixed route bus service is set to expire in June of 2023. So we'd like to explore our current operating agreements with Valley Metro to see if there are opportunities for Tempe to reduce costs there. Slide, please. So here's a snapshot of our public involvement strategy. We plan to use these outreach methods in an initial community needs type survey, and additionally, we've developed a schedule that integrates well with a twice annual regional service change process, which will repeat as necessary through the duration of this effort. Next slide. And then here's our schedule and next steps. Looking ahead, we'll be conducting outreach in the fall through various public meetings and presentations, and we'll be returning in December with an update on our findings. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Eric.
Thanks, Sam. So we're going to go to next slide. So we did take this presentation to the Transportation Commission last week. They did support our 3-year timeline for balancing the fund. They also made a motion to support the framework for our decision-making and our process. The motion from the commission did include wanting to pay special attention to equity in the community, which we do value, of course. And we'll do that. And they also wanted to emphasize the need to preserve as much of our system as possible, reducing the resident and rider impact, as we've talked about in this presentation. We are asking for tonight to get direction or support on the 3-year timeline, and any other feedback you want to provide on the decision-making framework that we will go through. We also want to mention that, of course, we'll stay really connected to our budget office and ensure that with the new whatever new economic numbers we get, that we are constantly revisiting how we are approaching this effort. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. And I think, Greg, if we could leave the presentation up, because I think it might be valuable for us to reference.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Sam. All right, anyone from council? Let's see, Vice Mayor Keating will start.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Eric. It was a great presentation. I'm so in favor of your 3-year plan. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do like the idea of trying to reduce losses and mitigate abuse of our fare system in order to kind of make up for some of the cost gaps that we're currently facing. So I think it's a responsible and well thought out plan. So I say I'm all for it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. And next up, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, guys. Great job looking into making things a little bit more efficient. One question on the routes that you're thinking about eliminating, we've said one, I don't know if it was 2, but are those obviously the one you were talking about with the lowest in the region? You did state, and I'm just curious, for some of those riders that might utilize that route, what are we talking in terms of change in distance for them to get to the next stop? Is that significant? I'll go with that question. I got one more after that.
We'll let Sam, if you want to answer that question about this 520 route and the consolidation there.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, council members. So yes, the route that we're considering eliminating is Route 520, which basically snakes through central Tempe just on the north side of the 60. And we're essentially proposing a consolidation of that route with Route 521, which snakes through central Tempe just on the south side of the 60. One of the findings of the MAG study, and really what the region has shifted towards for the express routes, is what's called the park and ride model, which essentially capitalizes on picking a centralized location and attract people to park their vehicle there to board the express bus, with the idea that the bus then more efficiently hops on the freeway and goes straight to downtown Phoenix. This is a model that we haven't really tried in Tempe yet, although it's been tried and tested in many other cities in the region successfully. And we do anticipate that, that will remain an option for riders on the 520. It's also the new route would also be well connected by other transit options as well. So there's the option to use other transit to access it. But of course, this is all, I'm making some assumptions here. This is all pending what we hear from those riders as we go out and do the outreach in the coming weeks and months.
Great. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear on that. And then obviously in the past, and I think Councilmember Erdon Savage might expand on this, we ran our whole system separate from Valley Metro. Am I correct? Years ago. I'm just curious, what's some of the disadvantages, advantages of being so-called with the region or having our own operation, or within the city of Tempe? Do we get, obviously we're working with the region, we always will work with the region, but in terms of cost and in terms of possibly having a little bit more say in how we can control things, have we looked into that on, are we in the right direction? Are we not in the right direction? And I have one more question after that.
I'll take this one. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. We had you will probably remember, we had a very exhaustive examination of the pros and cons of the different scenarios for operations of service, whether Tempe or Valley Metro did it, and that was done several years ago in 2010, 2009, 2011. We would look, if there was a request from council, we would look to creating or replicating some of that same data and kind of revisit that study and bring that back to you for review. There's a lot of information in there, and I wouldn't want to portray pros and cons today, but that's something that we could certainly report back to you on.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great just to kind of get a gauge. Not to say that, yeah, this is great or that is great, but I think it kind of gives us a great reference on how we're doing and where we're going, and if that is the right direction. And maybe it's not the right direction now, but maybe in a year from now or 2, 3, whatever it is, that might be a consideration. So I think having that information would be great for us to look at, to analyze. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate you mentioned something about the orbit system possibly having a monetary value or a monetary fee, 50 cents, dollar, whatever it may be. I have no idea, but curious on your thoughts on that. But obviously that will be pitched, I believe, to some public outreach and just kind of get the opinion on that. I know there's been quite a bit of difference of opinion on that, charging, not charging, but a quick opinion, and will that also be part of the discussion?
Yeah, so that's another great question. That will be part of our discussion. As Sam mentioned, we want to do sort of a community values survey at the start of this process and get a feel for where people are at with these with all these issues. We felt that because this was something that it could generate funding, and it was something that was explored as part of our reductions that we went through 8-9 years ago, that we should also put it on the table now for discussion. Quite honestly, as Sam mentioned, we do think that the success of Orbit can be somewhat attributed to it being a free fare, and it is something that we feel, we know that when it went through the process years ago to ask the question, that the community felt really strong about continuing Orbit as a free system, that was part of kind of a value of Orbit in Tempe. So we would just put it forward as a question and see kind of how the community feels about it and share that back with you in December.
That's awesome. I'm curious on that. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm curious on that. Downtown region, having a free fare around the downtown area, I would say, yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious to see what that discussion brings on the outline area, so to speak, with the Orbit system. So thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, I just want to let the council know and the public and our residents that we have a really amazing transit team. I just want to give my hats off to Eric and Sam and for Marge. They've been just really big advocates for Tempe Transit and really making sure that we have a solid, comprehensive transit system that works for our residents. So you guys have been amazing. I've enjoyed being the representative of Valley Metro. It's just been a really great team effort, and I will tell anybody, stand behind you guys all the time and say we have a really good team that cares about this community, and you guys show it every single day. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I'm sure Eric's probably all red and blushing because he does that. But I appreciate this. I think you guys are going on the right path moving forward. I think this is kind of what we need to do. I know we're in budget constraints. We got budget issues and forecasting concerns in regards to revenues and so many things to be thinking about. So I think it's really important that we're looking at all cost saving measures, and this, like I think Joel mentioned too, this being one of our very largest contracts, just to kind of remember and go back as to why we decide to regionalize and the benefits from doing that, the pros and the cons. So I would support that if we have an opportunity, Eric and Sam, to just do a little deeper dive into that contract and making sure that we are still it's still promising what our expectations were from the beginning, and want to do what's best for Tempe. I mean, that's our bottom line. And I think in order to do that, we've just got to be really thorough. So I do know you're going to do some really extensive outreach. You guys have been doing a really good job with that and getting people to get engaged and get involved and to get their feedback. So I know that you're not making any suggested changes or any recommendations without it being thoroughly vetted from our residents. You guys definitely have a really good pulse on that. And, you know, I'm really proud of the process and the way you guys operate. So I would certainly support that moving forward. And, you know, I look forward to learning a little bit more of, you know, what it looks like in the future too. So I'm not saying yes, no on a contract, or maybe there's a hybrid model. I'm just saying, let's just, you know, be open and flexible and see what's out there and what works best for Tempe. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Eric Salmon and Marge, even though Marge isn't there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Next up, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric and Samuel, great presentation. It's always good to see you both, and I'm just super excited. I agree with Councilmember Arredondo that we have a amazing transportation team, and we're fortunate to have them, and I would argue they're the best in the valley. I'm comfortable following your lead in regard to the transportation recommendations. I'm supportive of the streetcar, bus shelters, and bus advertising. If it increases our revenues and we can still save our services, I think that's really worth exploring. I'm also glad that you're going to continue to reach out to our residents and neighborhoods as to what they feel like are their priorities and needs. So thanks again for amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Adams. Next up, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple comments and then a few quick questions, and thank you so much for your presentation, guys. So along with the Transportation Commission and the other council members, I do support the timeline and especially the emphasis on equity, and I would hope that you would involve equity in action to make sure that folks that are involved with equity in action are consulted on the plan. Lost revenue. So in our CIP this past year, because of COVID, we had to do it. We did skip over a lot of federal and regional grant opportunities. And, you know, the cost of federal for us is 5.7%, and federal and regional funders would pay for 94.3% of a number of these projects. So it was a painful cut because it came with so much cost share, but I understand why. Because these projects also do come with maintenance costs. So it's unfair just to look at the structural costs. There's going to be maintenance costs from the point of construction on. So I would ask that in this discussion, as you study this, to look for a plan possibly to find a way to pay that cost share and the O&M, and maybe it involves working with our development agreements and revisiting that. I just look at possible recovery of that, because that kind of investment, over 94% of federal dollars pay for a lot of these projects. It's so hard to turn away from it. So I'd ask that we look at that. And then I agree with Councilmember Adams that I'm really willing to look at advertising. I'm not sure how much of an impact it's going to be. It may be minimal, but it may be worthwhile. So I think it should be investigated. And then we've talked about shade at our transit stops, and I think we need to get more shade. If you see the language in the original ballot initiative, transit stops were prominent in the ballot language. It said shaded areas and benches for passengers. And I think of all the things that were listed in that language, I think we've fallen a little bit short with not even a half of our transit waiting areas having shade. So I think we need to find a way within this plan to really fulfill that promise. And I also support Councilmember Navarro and Arredondo Savage when they mentioned about taking a look at system management with First Transit. And the fundamental question, I think, is, has service improved since Tempe last managed it in 2013, so 7 years ago? And about Orbit, I would just caution about an Orbit fare program. I mean, we should look at everything. Everything should be at the table, but we have to consider that it could have a devastating impact on our houseless population, many of whom rely on the Orbit as a lifeline to get services, whether it's at the library or whether it's human services at the library. So, and our houseless population may not have a seat at the table, right? So they may not be at these meetings. So I think we need to really think about that and how we integrate their voice. But I am interested with Orbit of looking at non-performing routes. And I know we might be reducing frequency, But I think about the case of Saturn, and I think we heard in the past, it's over $20 a ride, if I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. And I know you need like 5 years to solidify a route and to maximize the passengers. And so it'd be kind of unfair just to say, cut Saturn, it's obvious, it's the most expensive route. That may not be fair. So you have to balance, like, how much do you reduce frequency before you kill the route? So I know it's a complex issue, but I would just ask that you look at non-performing or low-performing orbit routes. That being said, I just have 2 quick questions. It's about what the anticipated expenditure is for M&O for streetcar, and where do the scooter revenues go? I didn't necessarily see it listed in slide 9, because I believe last year there was $500,000 in revenue from scooters. So where does the scooter revenue go, and what are the streetcar anticipated expenses? Thank you.
Thank you for all those comments and recommendations, Councilmember Cube. I'll answer the streetcar question. We are still working through our final operations costs for streetcar with Valley Metro. In fact, in October, we have a couple policy meetings to really zero in on that. And so we will be sharing that. We should be able to have that number to share with you in December. Our current IGA for streetcar that was adopted several years ago shows I believe it's a $4.7 million annual figure for that operation. Some of the current discussions are showing it larger than that. We are looking for, obviously, as Sam mentioned, we're looking for efficiencies in our light rail and streetcar operations costs. So we're doing kind of an internal exhaustive process with Valley Metro to get us to lower rates for operation. But again, we'll share more in December. And then I'm stumped on any revenues for the bike share, and we can get back to you on that unless Marilyn or Shelley, who's on the call, may know where those
not bike share
are revenues.
Yeah,
not bike share, scooter.
Yeah, I popped in, Eric.
Hi.
Mayor, members of council, with respect to the scooter SATV program revenue, you're absolutely right, Councilmember QE. Last year, I think our revenue was over $500,000 for that for the SATV program, and for the previous fiscal year, there were 2 motor officers that were entered as a supplemental request against that revenue, but that doesn't account for all the $500,000. So you're absolutely right. There is some revenue available through the SATV program, and which is the shared active transportation vehicles, and it currently goes into those revenues go into the general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to ask if that could be if it could be brought up a consideration of going into the transportation fund.
Sounds good. Is that to be included?
Hello, Tempe. I know these are challenging times and things are changing every day. Even though we are under a lot of pressure, we have to remember to support each other and our community. One of the easiest, quickest, and most efficient ways that we can support our community now and into the future is by filling out the census. The census is easy, secure, and it only takes a couple of minutes to complete. And the best part is, you can do it 100% online. We need to remember for each person counted, the city receives funding to support vital functions. Functions like public safety, our first responders, human services, parks and recreation, transportation, and many more. These are the services that have helped us become and will help us stay a world-class city.
This community is full of wonderful, great, and caring people. We have families, veterans, professionals, students, and amazing Tempe employees that call Tempe home. Let's continue to support each other now more than ever and make sure you are counted.
Hi, welcome back to Mindful Minis, Episode 5. Today's episode, Mindful Reflections. Today, we'll learn an easy way to remember the process of paying attention without judgment. Things to remember as we learn a new skill. Be here in this present moment. Give yourself patience and always accept kindness. Consider the foundation of mindfulness, breathing. So when in doubt, just breathe. Reese is ready for today's adventure. Now let's put on our judge-free goggles. Like a new sunrise each morning, practicing mindfulness can bring new beginnings. Our key word here is solar. Solar is an acronym, which means that each letter is here to help us remember a step in mindfulness. First, we must stop. Next, we observe. Then, let it go. And return. Solar. Let's talk about that. In order to be mindful, we must first stop what we're doing and be in the present moment. Then, whenever distractions come, observe them, but let them go. And then return to the mindfulness exercise that you're practicing. Next episode, we'll learn about the magic mustache. And remember, be kind to yourself, to others, and to the journey.
Change. Change leads to opportunity, and opportunity opens doors. Arizona at Work is connecting job seekers with local resources, helping you explore career pathways, access free training, obtain new certifications, and find a job. Together, our network can help you return stronger. Find training programs for new career opportunities at azcommerce.com/returnstronger.
Tempe Pre is the City of Tempe's high-quality, full-day preschool program committed to supporting our youngest learners. Our program is open to families who live or work in Tempe, and we also offer financial assistance to those families who meet our income eligibility requirements. The benefit of having our preschool classrooms on a school campus is that it offers this safe, secure environment in well-established neighborhoods. And it also offers additional services and supports that you wouldn't find in a private program, like nurse services, cafeteria services, administrative supports. The partnership also allows families who are interested in continuing in that program to have their kindergartner transition right from preschool into the kindergarten classroom. Every teacher in the Tempe Pre program is a certified teacher, and they have an early childhood endorsement, which makes them even more ready to teach in the classroom. Every instructional assistant that we hire also has early childhood experience in the classroom, so both of those components help to make really strong teaching teams. And the low student to teacher ratio of 9:1 in every classroom helps those kiddos get individual attention that they need. High quality early learning is all about being ready to learn. It's less about the academic component because that comes in kindergarten and beyond. What you see in a preschool classroom when children might be counting bugs or putting puzzles together are actually early math skills because it helps children to count and sort and look at shapes and sizes as they're putting these things together. Every classroom will have a reading area which supports early literacy. Our kiddos aren't reading yet, but it introduces them to books and how to take care of books and how to read through pictures.
I wanted my daughter to be prepared. I wanted her to have those foundational skills to kind of get her a jump start on what she needs in order to be successful in kindergarten. As a previous kindergarten teacher, I could tell the difference between my students who went to preschool and my students who didn't go to preschool. It was very obvious.
It's really exciting to see that part of her just develop. It's not this scary thing anymore. She's really looking forward to her next year in kindergarten.
What happens in preschool is children are learning how to sit in a circle, how to follow instructions, and how to be good friends. Those skills are so beneficial for kindergarten teachers because then they're ready to hit the ground running when they start that first day. Finding the right preschool for your child is really difficult, and also when you have a full-time working schedule and you're trying to find care for your child, it can be a real challenge. So what Tempe
Council approved an adaptive reuse program to incentivize redevelopment. The ordinance allows for relief from regulatory requirements such as parking, landscape design, some building design aspects, and 2 projects in the area have made use of this program so far. And they are the Wedge and the Apache and Oak apartments. The overall impact of these development efforts can be seen in a comparison in the number of planned area developments on the books as of 2000, which is what you see here, compared to 2020, which is this. As you see, in 2000, our records indicate that there was only 1 planned area development in the redevelopment area. However, as of today, there are 25 planned area developments in the same corridor. To reiterate the impact that the city's redevelopment plan has had on this area, please consider this next map, which overlays vacant parcels on top of where the PADs are. The vacant parcels totaling about 30 acres today are in green hashes and the PADs are in solid red. We can see where underutilized parcels were developed and where there are planned developments in progress. But it is also clear that while progress has been made, the goals of the redevelopment plan are not yet fully met. Now I will pass it to Vanessa Spartan from Engineering and Transportation to highlight achievements made in transit and circulation in the area.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just to give you an overview of some of the progress, Eric and Sam kind of spoke on some of this earlier this evening. The transit tax was passed in 1996, so that's just prior to the redevelopment area being approved. And the transit tax pays for many of our transit and multimodal projects that we see out there today. The light rail is primarily the most transformational part of the redevelopment area transit investment that occurred in 2008. There are 4 stops within the redevelopment area, Dorsey, McClintock, Smith, and Price. And then just on the western extent of the redevelopment area, there's another light rail station at Rural. The area is served by a total of 8 bus routes, 3 of which are orbit routes. And then there's bus stops, sprinkled throughout the whole area. The streetcar will be opening in 2021 with the eastern extent at Dorsey and Apache. We have 3 park and ride facilities along the Apache corridor at Dorsey, McClintock, and at the Price 101. The Maricopa Association of Governments has done a commuter rail study, and they've identified 2 alternative routes for the East Valley that both span through the redevelopment area. One is at the southern extent of it, the Union Pacific corridor, and the other is on the eastern extent at the 101. And then we wanted to just touch on the transit-oriented developments that Maria had mentioned before and their investments in making transit successful. The cul-de-sac or the East Line Village area is an example, a recent example of one where they're actually helping to contribute with a signalized pedestrian crossing to the light rail platform at Smith. Next slide. From an improved circulation standpoint beyond transit, bicycle and pedestrian circulation, we wanted to hit on the Transportation Overlay District and the redevelopment actions have really been transformational. That overlay district actually requires 14 feet of pedestrian space, 8 of which is sidewalk. The remaining space is for streetscapes, landscaping, amenities, zones, things like that. In concert with the light rail corridor, the Apache Boulevard travel lanes were narrowed and bicycle lanes were added. In addition to Apache Boulevard, there's other bicycle and pedestrian improvements that have been implemented following the transportation plan, including McClintock and University, where we have bicycle lanes. And then we have future ones planned for this area, including on Rural, Smith, Dorsey, Price, and then the Sprocket Bike-It corridor. The Tempe Canal has a multi-use path on part of that canal corridor. The remaining area for the path construction would be done in coordination with a future redevelopment effort. And then we also just wanted to touch on that some of the council priorities that have happened since then have really are in sync with the goals of the redevelopment area, including the 20-minute city and the Vision Zero council priorities are really in sync with the goals of redevelopment within the Apache corridor. I'm going to hand it off to Levon to talk about the progress on housing.
There we go. Good afternoon. So as far as the housing and density relates to the overall Apache Boulevard Density Bonus Program, since 2000 and into 2020, there has been a 53% increase in the overall housing units that are available on this in the redevelopment area. Public-private partnerships have been especially important as we're developing the affordable housing and workforce housing units along this stretch. Just some examples of the public and private partnerships that have gone on in this to increase the housing. East Line Village, which was mixed use at Apache and River, that does also include some office space for the Chodo. You have Blue at East Line, which is in part of that project is workforce affordable, and as part of that you have the Lemon Street houses that are affordable housing units that are being built as permanently affordable rental housing for the affiliate nonprofit of the Housing Authority. Tempe Micro Estates, which is the combined project from the city and Newtown for 13 tiny houses, micro estates of permanently affordable housing. These are set up as home ownership options. Valor on 8th, which is 50 units of affordable housing that is preferenced for veterans. Just to continue, because this has had a huge impact on our ability to increase the affordable housing along here. You have Gracie's Village, Meridian, and the Apache Trails Project. Having a designated redevelopment area considerably assists with the ability to secure funding for these types of projects, whether it is the low-income housing tax credit or LIHTC, when funding is available, Section 811 or 202 funding that comes out from HUD, and then of course other funding options that are available for mixed-use projects. Moving into the next slide.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? I have my hand raised about the previous slide.
Yeah, Councilmember Cubie.
Sorry, Levon. So I see the 53% increase in units in affordable workforce housing units. Do we know how many units have been added to that area, that just total units added? So the percentage of those?
So
to have an answer today.
I would want to go back and look at that if I could research the percentage of overall units versus affordable workforce, please.
Thank you.
So, and then just for, as visual representation, for an increase in overall housing units, in 2000, there were under 3,000 housing units. Now in 2020, it is almost 4,500 housing units, which has definitely increased choice and availability along the spectrum of housing opportunity. And that is just from CoStar. Moving into the next slide, it shows the increase in the student housing. So there's a complete picture of all housing options. In 2000, it was just over 3,000 units, and coming into 2020, we're a little over 9,000 units. So all in, there has been an increase in all available housing options at multiple price points as a result of the redevelopment area, at which I will hand it back over to Maria.
All right, thanks, Levon. So there's also been progress in terms of historic preservation. One example is the E.M. White Dairy Barn at 1810 East Apache. It was built in 1918, and it's the only known river cobble building remaining in Tempe. It's in excellent condition and is listed on the Arizona State Historic Property Inventory. Major original design features such as the parapet, exposed concrete columns, door framing, and cobble surfaces have all been preserved. The dairy barn was converted to a commercial establishment after 1930, and it operates as the Tempe Tavern today. Additionally, in the 8th Street Special Development Area, both the Elias Rodriguez House and the Four Peaks Brewery are examples of the preservation of the unique history of the area through the sensible rehabilitation of historic structures. Finally, we'd like to present the impact of community investment in the area, primarily through initiatives led by LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. Their records indicate that since 2012, they have led nonprofit and community partner activities along Apache, and specifically in the Escalante neighborhood, that total almost $2 million. Some specific examples are an NFL grant to renovate Escalante Park, facade improvements on small businesses on Apache and the rebranding of that area as the Spice Trail, and a community mural. Other investments include additional murals, the River Street beautification, bike racks, and sign improvements, which have all together begun to create incremental but noticeable change in the corridor's appearance and image. So in conclusion, a great deal of progress has been made, but we are not done yet. Staff believes that renewing the redevelopment designation will allow additional progress to be made on the redevelopment plan objectives, with continued focus on density, increased land utilization, transit-oriented development, and the establishment of more gateway feature elements to enhance the overall image of the area. And with that, we thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions that we can answer?
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation. Anyone from council have any comments or questions? I don't see any immediately. I will just say that I fully support it. If the question is, whether or not we are going to simply, renew this this redevelopment area. I mean, obviously, there's been a tremendous amount of success stories along Apache Boulevard, as you talked about. I think you said 35 projects have happened since this started over 10 years ago. And so my perspective is this is the kind of thing that I really would like to keep going. I spent a lot of time during my first run of the city council working on the adaptive reuse ordinance, and I'm really happy that a couple of companies have tried to make very active use of it during this time, and I hope it continues to be utilized. But my perspective is, where the city chooses to invest, people will follow. And if we continue to invest and reinvest in the Apache Boulevard area, we're going to continue to see more people want to be here, and just an increasing number of great things happen in this area and along the strip. So I am fully supportive of renewing this. So I'm going to go ahead and see Councilmember Jennifer Adams. So Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maria, for the great presentation, and everyone that also helped out with Maria. And I completely agree with Mayor Woods that I completely think that we should keep going with the redevelopment of this area. And I think it's amazing how this has transformed the area. So thank you. And Mayor Woods, I'll follow your lead on this with your recommendation.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Really appreciate it. Anybody else from council, any comments or questions? And if not, I'll just go ahead and assume that's consensus to move forward. All right, seeing none, Maria, Catherine, I'm going to go ahead and say that's your consensus to move forward. I really appreciate the presentation and looking forward to another 10 years.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up here, item 2E, which is traffic mitigation strategies. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we do have one public comment card from Linda Knudsen, and she requested to speak for herself.
Great, sounds good.
Thank you, Carla. On behalf of the Maple Ash, Wilson Art and Garden, and Mitchell Park Neighborhood Associations, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to express our concerns about this issue. Exponential growth and development in downtown Tempe has caused exponential growth in traffic volumes in our adjacent neighborhoods. 19 months ago, our three neighborhoods joined together and wrote a Marianne Corridor grant proposal dealing with traffic mitigation. We were then and still are unified in developing solutions for reducing speed and cut-through motor vehicle traffic throughout our neighborhoods in order to improve safety and quality of life. Our grant proposal, which was approved by you, included the completion of a detailed examination and analysis of our neighborhood transportation network. Along with city staff, we chose Y2K Engineering, which had assisted City Council earlier in creating Vision Zero for Tempe, as our consulting firm. After Y2K had completed their research, including a neighborhood traffic count that incidentally recorded 25,900 vehicles entering and exiting our neighborhoods in one 24-hour period, we applied for another grant this year that would start the first steps of our mitigation plan, 3 speed cushions on 13th Street. We received the grant, but were told that we had to follow the step manual guidelines for a small-scale project, even though Y2K had confirmed through the data and their research that our traffic problem would need a large-scale project to solve our issues. We had concerns regarding the difficulty of implementing any changes because of the myriad of requirements set forth by the step manual and also because of its lack of clarity. Stakeholders, as defined by the manual, are not only the property owners, but also the responsible individuals who reside in the home. The demographics of our area, renters, multi-housing units, multiple property owners that don't live in the area, meant that acquiring the necessary signatures for implementation of these mitigation measures was extremely unlikely. Compounding this obstacle is the fact that a non-response is considered a no response when calculating the required signatures. We have gone over and beyond to obtain signatures. We sent postcards to the 40 properties on 13th Street. We have emailed renters, we've emailed owners, and our steering committee has even gone door to door during a pandemic to get responses. And after 3 months, we only have 19, 16 yes and 3 no's. Of the 6 properties that the step manual requires 100% approval, we have received 5 yes and 0 no's. However, the 6th property's non-response is considered a no within the system. We have 84% approval by the stakeholders who responded, who really care about the safety, quality of life, and preservation of these neighborhoods, but we can't begin to do anything about our traffic problems because of an obsolete mandate. We recognize we are not the only older or historic downtown neighborhood. However, there are many others like University Park and Daly Park that have traffic mitigation measures that include closures, which we believe have benefited them greatly. Those were done pre-step manual. The step manual has also not been updated since 2008. It is no longer applicable, especially to the neighborhoods within the urban core. We simply believe that a unique and large-scale project like ours that is based on technical data and professional opinion should proceed with robust public involvement and be determined with a consensus of a simple majority. It should then follow up with City Council acceptance and support. 3 minutes is not an adequate time to go into more specific detail, but I welcome any and all questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, first of all, for your public comment, but also thank you so much for all of your diligent work, not only yourself, but all the folks in the Northwest Tempe neighborhoods in terms of coming together to submit for that grant and all of the hard work that you've done. It is not often that you see so many different neighborhoods, even in the same general kind of geographic section of the city, come together on something. And it just shows you how important traffic mitigation is to your overall community. And so really just appreciate the work in terms of spearheading this effort and all the folks that you work with, the other neighborhood leaders in the Northwest Tempe neighborhood. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm going to go ahead quickly and turn to Councilmember Cubie, and then I'll go to Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I have 2 questions for you, Linda, and thanks so much. I know it's hard to get everything in 3 minutes. But do the mitigation devices that you've installed in your neighborhood, are they working adequately? And one more question after.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. We do have mitigation devices that actually started back in 2004. A second amendment to the Centerpoint Development Agreement was made, and it required the developers of Centerpoint to contribute $400,000 to fund for traffic calming for the neighborhoods built, or for the neighborhoods in the adjacent neighborhoods. And then in 2010, we began getting chicanes from that, as well as traffic circles. And at the time, those seemed to be helpful, especially when we applied for more Marianne Corridor grants and were fortunate enough to receive the money for art projects, public art projects that we put in. But as we've found since 2010, we have had on some of our streets 109% in traffic increase in traffic volume. And we've had speeds that have gone up as well. And unfortunately, what has happened is we've had a number of accidents on all of our streets, especially Farmer, which at some during our study had approximately 4,000 vehicles on it in a 24-hour period. And because of these accidents, we're continuing to lose all of the chicanes and the art that we had in them. And so at this point, the traffic circles and the chicanes, as well as the speed humps that we have, we found out through Y2K that the speed humps were not placed correctly over the years, and we do not have them in pairs in the distance they need to be.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, should I ask the second question or wait for Councilmember Adams?
Yes, go forward, Councilmember Cubie.
Well, could you also detail a little bit more your neighbor's experience in getting the signatures and how close you came and that whole process? I know you went over it quickly, but could you detail it a bit more?
Yes, I can. So as I said, we were placed in a small scale project situation. So looking at the step manual, you'll see that in order to have any type of mitigation device put on a street, we have to have 100% of the people who live adjacent to the mitigation device. We have to have 75% of the people that are actually living on that the street is their primary street. And then we have to have 51% of remaining stakeholders who could be people on other streets that are affected by the mitigation that we put in there. So in our situation, we had to make sure that we got information out to 40 properties. And we had to get those percentages on each one of those. And as I said, when I went through it kind of quickly, we've gone to every means that we possibly could. We sent postcards, sent emails to the renters, to the property owners. We even went to the county assessor site to make sure that we had the right owners, sent emails to any of the contacts that we could find there, and then finally started going door to door to try to get signatures. And unfortunately, because of this, the step manual, what we're seeing happen is that technical data and professional opinion is being outweighed by a property owner that maybe lives in another state that just doesn't want to respond or doesn't like a speed cushion.
Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Linda, such a great presentation, and I know 3 minutes is not very long, but you did a fantastic job. I've been in your neighborhood a great deal and feel you need a lot more traffic mitigation for safety purposes, and safety needs to always be the #1 consideration. So I also believe that 84% should be enough to move forward with traffic mitigation. I'm completely supportive of the traffic mitigation in the Maple Ash neighborhood, and active residents like you are exactly what our neighborhoods need. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams, and I thank you for the whole steering committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. All right, seeing no other hands from council, thank you, Linda, again. I'm just repeating everything I said before. Just really appreciate all the work that you've done on this, and I fully agree that this is a huge item in your area, and I want to make sure that we can do whatever we can to make this a reality. So thank you very much. And I'm excited to also talk about what we can to reform some of these processes. I recognize that a lot of these things were kind of enacted many years ago, but it's always imperative upon us as a council to go back and look at these processes and make sure that they're still useful and that they're still the right thing to do in present day, especially the conversation, I think, regarding having to go door to door to collect signatures, especially during the era of COVID-19. I think we really need to go back and look at that policy among others. So thank you so much for bringing that not only to mine, but to the council's attention. Also, next up here, want to make sure we go to the presentation by staff. I know we wanted to make sure we asked Linda some questions first, but if staff wants to get up and give a presentation now, that would be wonderful.
Hi, Mayor, members of council. This is Marilyn DeRosa again, and I just wanted to introduce our neighborhood traffic calming program presentation, which will be provided by our traffic engineer, Kathy Hollow. She's going to cover the history of the program, the variety of features that can be used to slow traffic in our Tempe neighborhoods, the historical challenges with funding, and how the program currently operates, including the community engagement and the consensus requirements, which is based on Ms. Knudsen's presentation, has created some frustration on the part of that particular those neighborhoods. So, Kathy, with that, I'll let you give the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Marilyn said, my name is Catherine Hollow, and I'm the City Traffic Engineer. I'm happy to be here today to present information about our traffic mitigation strategies that are used in relation to neighborhood traffic management. Briefly, traffic mitigation ties in with two council performance measures: safe and secure communities, as it has the potential to reduce crashes, and quality of life, as traffic mitigation contributes towards the 20-minute city objectives of our multimodal transportation system. Little background on the program: the city had a neighborhood traffic management program that was later revised to the Streetscape and Transportation Enhancement Program, and I'll talk a little bit more on this in a minute. And we also had the neighborhood grant program, which many of you are probably familiar with, that can provide up to $15,000 for a neighborhood improvement that also includes traffic mitigation. So the background on the STEP program: it started off as the neighborhood traffic management program, and that was ended up being mainly a speed hump program. The city first tested locations to determine support and effectiveness of the speed humps when the program began, and the program launched in the late 1990s, with the first speed humps being installed in October 1999. Now, as the city grew and traffic continued to increase, residents started to request options beyond speed humps. So the city developed an RFQ for the development of a program and a manual to provide guidance for the installation of additional devices. And that process is outlined on the slide above. As you see, it started in 2006 with a multidisciplinary team that was led by a consultant. There was peer city analysis done, council presentation, neighborhood meetings were held, or public meetings were held, and the manual was finalized in 2007 and culminated in 2008 with a council resolution to revise the manual and change the program to the Streetscape and Transportation Enhancement Program, also known as STEP. So I've talked a little bit about the process to update the program. I have a few points about what was addressed in the new program. So the STEP manual, the updated STEP manual was included property owners, improved the notification system, define the level of support to test traffic calming measures, and then also provided options for determining consensus for large and small scale alternatives. The small scale projects can be implemented within the budgetary authority of the Engineering and Transportation Director, and large scale projects require council action for budgeting. This slide presents a list of the devices that are available through the program. And for the most part, we divide them into the large scale projects, or the large scale devices, or devices that might be used in a large scale project, and then the devices that are used in small scale projects. So large scale usually applies to more than just one street, probably part of a neighborhood or a whole neighborhood, and it requires examining an area of impacts, and usually costs more, obviously, than a small scale project. Small scale projects usually apply to just one street or corridor and cost less. So next I want to talk a little bit about the process that's outlined in the manual. So the process begins with a request from a resident. They provide their name, just information about the concern, any documents they may want to provide, and discussion about support they have from the neighborhood. The city staff then reviews the application, conducts counts or surveys, and does some research, and decide whether or not the project should go forward. Staff responds to the requester with a decision to proceed with the project. So as I said, we have small scale and large scale. Implementing a small scale project, the requester, or this neighborhood champion, works to gain consensus or approval of the neighborhood. The petition is provided by the city, and the requirements are outlined there on the slide. We have 100% of the stakeholders whose access is affected, basically those people who live immediately adjacent to the device that's being installed, need to agree. 75% of the stakeholders whose primary street would be affected, and 51% of the remaining stakeholders who may be affected. If consensus is received, implementation proceeds based on budget availability. So for a large-scale project, there's a few more steps involved. There's public meetings with the stakeholders. There's an action team that is formed with members of the neighborhood, like 5 to 10 people, and split across the neighborhood so that we have a good representation. The team works on a plan, and then a public meeting is held to present the concept for testing. Testing requires 51% approval of the area in order to proceed. Then the testing occurs and comments are collected, and the condition of approval requires a level of consensus similar to the small scale that we just talked about, that has the 100%, the 75%, and 51% consensus needed for the project to go forward. If the project is selected to go forward, it gets submitted for CIP funding. Now, it should be noted that the city has received only one request for a large-scale project, which was for the Daly Park neighborhood. And after going through the process, consensus was not reached by the residents, and therefore the project was never built. As part of preparing for this presentation, we took a look at what other cities are doing. Other cities in the Valley all have a similar program. You can see the names are slightly different, but they all are for neighborhood traffic calming. One of the features I included in the table was that some of the cities require a resident contribution, a monetary contribution. Tempe, Scottsdale, and Glendale do not. The fourth column has the approvals that are required by the other cities, which are somewhat similar to what Tempe has required in the past. And then I also included the data requirements for, in this case, it's for the speed humps, because some devices have different requirements, but I just included what is required for the speed humps. And again, there's a volume, that's the vehicles per day, and a speed that is measured before, it has to be, the threshold has to be met before it be installed. The only city that doesn't have thresholds is Phoenix, and they do take speed, they do collect speed data, but the data is used to determine the amount of resident contribution to what is being installed.
Real quick, Catherine, Councilmember Cubie, did you want to wait till the end of the presentation, or do you want to ask your question?
Well, mine relates specifically to slide 10.
Okay, go for it.
So I just have a concern, Kathy, just about the comparable cities. I mean, typically when we look at, water rates and such, we look at our comparable cities, but I'm wondering whether Gilbert and Glendale, Chandler, Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale are necessarily comparable in this instance, because we think that we have town and gown issues. I mean, Phoenix does in some sense, but we are, really focused on, or ASU is really a driver in our community. And we have the highest percentage of bike ridership in the state and really high in the Southwest. And we have much higher number of pedestrians and in this historic area that's very close to downtown, close to ASU. So I'm wondering whether comparable cities might not be Austin or Boulder or other areas that are focused on, we're not a college town, we may be a college city, but I wonder if we shouldn't look outwards a little bit and not just be focused on cities in the East Valley that may not have the kind of ridership that we have, the pedestrian use that we have.
And we can do that if we start looking at making changes to the program. This was strictly to provide a quick comparison of what other cities are doing right now. So definitely
understood.
possible. Okay, yeah, one more slide. So
I see Councilmember Adams' hand as well.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Woods. I also share Lauren's concerns about this. I don't think we're comparing apples and apples, and believe that we should maybe look at Tucson, Flagstaff, Austin, those other big college towns that share these kinds of issues. So thank you, Councilmember Kuby, for bringing that up.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Adams. Catherine, if you want to keep going.
Okay, this is my last slide.
So close.
It was, are so close. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of the funding of the program, because obviously the funding is needed to implement. So when the project started, the funding was about $200,000 a year. In fiscal year 08-09, we had the recession and the funding was put on hold and eventually eliminated. Staff did have a wait list while the program was on hold, and over 100 residents' names were on the wait list. In fiscal year 16-17, the funding was reinstated in the CIP at $100,000 a year. And now in 2021, the funding has basically been placed on hold, and we have 32 locations that remain on the wait list. We also have 11 residents currently that have petitions to collect signatures. And just close with this, potential funding sources for the program would be possibly money from the capital improvement program, or developer contributions through a development agreement, or the development review process. And with that, open it, ask if there's any more comments or questions about the existing program as it stands today.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Councilmember Garland.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. I just want to say also thank you to Linda and her steering committee for going through that long process to get their mitigation study finished. And I mentioned to her and her committee that I thought it was sad that they had to get a neighborhood grant, which should be used for them to be able to put shade or benches or neighborhood art into their community, but instead they had to use it to do a study to try to keep their neighbors safe and to keep people from cutting through their neighborhood. So I just want to throw that in there. I also want to say that I went through the STEP program to get speed humps on the streets in my neighborhood, and it was not easy. It was quite time consuming. It was made difficult for me because I was also dragging along my 4 kids who were aged 1 through 6. But I got it done. But I do think that if there's any way that we could make that process easier for our residents, it would really, really be appreciated. And again, I forgot to say, Catherine, thank you for the presentation. But I have a question regarding slide 10, the slide with the cities on it in comparison. Yep. But I have a different question than my colleagues had. I was wondering if we could maybe, when you're looking at this, dig a little bit deeper on this. And, I'm wondering if the cities who that you have listed there have their residents, the ones that have residents contributing, have they always done it that way? Or have they had to transition to a partial resident funding like we could possibly do? I'm just wondering of those 2 questions. When you start getting more information, that might be helpful.
Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Any other council members have any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Kuby.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just have a question for Kathy. Why is the combined Maple Ash, Mitchell Park, Wilson Arts and Garden neighborhoods, why was that not considered a large scale project?
So I think because they did, it would be if it came through the city process, but they chose to get a grant to do the process and have developed it on its own. And I guess when it comes back into the city, it will, so to speak, it will be considered a large scale project. Does that make sense? I don't know if I said that correctly.
Sure, no, I understand that does make sense. It seems like, for the Marion Quarter Grant, you have to go through substantial engagement with the community and with your neighbors to get that funding and even apply. And it feels like that is ignored in this process. So that's something to look at too when you're revamping it is, if there has already been a substantial public component, how does that get counted? How should that be counted? And I mean, obviously, I think a consensus is brewing that we do need to update the rules and regs and the STEP manual, and perhaps it's an outside consultant that comes in to do it. I don't know if that's a cost, but I think it is time. And I also wanted to emphasize that the non-response, if there's a non-response that equals no, that just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I think it should not be that way. I would like to look at that issue at least. And it just seems that non-responsive absentee landlords shouldn't be able to decide traffic management. It seems like people that actually live there should have some say. And again, we have this unique neighborhood and we're a unique city. We have people that live here that over 50% of our residents are not homeowners or live in rental housing. So shouldn't they have some impact on the policies that affect them every single day? Again, with increased numbers of people walking and riding bikes, we need to adapt our STEP program to adapt to modern times. And so I'd really advocate for that. It has an expense associated with it. But thank you so much for all the work you did. And I look forward to hearing more.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Any other council members, comments or questions? All right, so let's see if I can kind of then, seeing none, if I can try to see if I can add a little synopsis to this.
Excellent.
I think my perspective, kind of looking at some of my notes that I've got here, is it just seems like we've got to take a look at a couple of items that were brought up by council members. One is the whole concept of the petition process in of itself, given COVID-19 and the fact that people are very concerned now about the notion of going door to door. I think we have to begin to take that into account with whatever we're going to do moving forward. And so I think we need to look and see, are there other ways, perhaps utilizing some form of technology or something else that we can actively utilize to not only gain citizen input, but to allow our residents to gain input from one another in their own neighborhoods. So I would like to see if there's some way that we could explore something on that front, because I don't want a situation where residents who are just, who are trying to do nothing but beautify and make their neighborhoods a much more comfortable, safe place to be, feel as if they may be getting penalized because they're unwilling to go door to door in the middle of a pandemic. And I just want to make sure we can talk about, we know the pandemic will not be here forever, but at the same time, we don't exactly know what the new normal is going to be once this actually is a thing of the past. We may still get people who say, I really don't want to go out and I really don't want to shake hands and I want to be careful about my interactions because of the next thing that may happen. So I just think we need to explore what options there might be, as opposed to just sort of the old-fashioned going door to door with a clipboard and a petition in hand. The other thing is talking about exploring the non-response issue, was the other issue I heard brought up by council members. If there's some way of exploring if there's some other way to classify what a non-response might be, as opposed to just sort of automatically considering that to be a no. Because I completely can, I understand why that's the way that the system currently works, but I also at the same time kind of empathize with where, residents are who are once again just trying to do something to improve the overall quality of their neighborhood, especially folks in the Northwest Tempe section of the community, because they've been so heavily impacted by the development that's directly north of them, with all of the rapid growth of the downtown, with the, multifamily complexes, the apartment buildings, streetcar, everything. So I want to make sure that we can do something to look at, how we might want to reconsider what that non-response process looks like and how that's actually counted. And with that, I want to quickly go to, I see Councilmember Navarro's hand, so I don't want to go off on a rant here. I'm going to let him go. And I also see Shelley's hand as well. So Councilmember Navarro.
Thanks, Mayor Woods. Yeah, I think you're hitting a point that's interesting to me is there is, we go through this process of probably changing some stuff. I think there's something to be said about the area. Obviously, something north of Broadway Road, is in this, type of change, and then south of that, maybe that, whatever that cutoff is, because of the development of density within those boundaries, Apache and all that other stuff. So those have an impact. Obviously, ASU, the renters, what are those areas which have the higher quantities of renters, of multifamily, all those things. So I think there's like a different set of circumstances that have to apply to that area versus the circumstances down to South Tempe, because I just there's something to be said about the process is a little bit different with that, and I think we need to explore what that looks like and possibly how we can probably engage with that. And I appreciate the presentation on this whole thing, to get an understanding. I know, Linda, we've had the conversation and we're talking about it, and when the process went through the process, and obviously COVID comes in, and now we have no traffic, but obviously we're eventually going to get back to that, someday, I would imagine. It'd be great, hopefully, if not, if people take changes within the works and working from home or half work from home, whatever that may be. There's something to be said about that. The other thing is, within those areas of the streets, are the streets in a size, and I'm looking on a map, to where if you park two cars, are they considered a smaller street to lessen the traffic? And I know that it's not really about, well, it could be about speed and stuff like that. It's just people are trying to do a cut through. So like Farmer, I take that, and that's a straight shot. You can cut through it and get into Mill Avenue a little bit quicker than waiting at the light. And so that makes it attractable to use. Does slowing it down reduce the traffic, even though it's a cut through, or cutting off streets to where they cannot advance through? I don't really know the answer. I do want to support the neighborhood because I think it's frustrating, obviously, within that neighborhood to get consensus on that. The other thing is, when you talk about trying to get involvement, and I was just thinking about this, how do I get text messages saying that, hey, there's something going on, or something to my area? But there's something to be said about technology, using text messages to say, hey, there's going to be a WebEx meeting in your neighborhood concerning about this. Please jump on and be part of it. It's a half an hour meeting, hour, whatever it is. But maybe there's something within technology that we can incorporate to help those neighborhoods out to get more people involved. I think, what we're going through right now, some of the frustration just on a regular council meeting is just getting down there, taking the time, driving, doing all that stuff. The possibilities of just having a WebEx meeting for certain geo neighborhoods to say, in this neighborhood, you're getting text messages, the WebEx meeting is going to be this, and we're going to talk about this. I'm curious on the involvement that you might get from that. And I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm going off too much with another cost, another expense, and how do we get there? But there's something to be said about the technology to get more neighbors involved in what's going on in their neighborhood. So just two thoughts, that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor Woods. So, having been the staff lead on the previous process where we created the STEP manual, I would like to propose a potential process that would include being led by a consultant, because I know the level of staff time and involvement that is needed to really look at all the things that the council has identified. I know Kathy's team is very small, and so that would be a large effort to take upon just by using staff resources. I know also it might be a little bit of a challenge because all of the managers who are funded through the HERF program did have to cut back in their operating areas. But I'm hopeful that we could create and pull together some money to do that. I also think through the process that maybe we create a stakeholder group that includes residents so that they can be directly involved in creating the process alongside us. So if the council would agree to something like that, we could go and look at our budgets and see if we could pull together that money and then start on a process using a consultant to help lead us through that.
Great, thank you so much, Shelley. Councilmember Cubie?
I would totally, thoroughly support that recommendation, Shelley. So thank you for that. And I just want to follow up on Councilmember Navarro's comments. And while we certainly are seeing fewer cars on the road due to COVID, I know the neighborhoods that we're talking about tonight they're reporting increased problems with speed. So it's about traffic calming. And I know you got to that point, but it's also about traffic calming, not just traffic reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. All right, so a couple of things actually. I really appreciate, Shelley, your two suggestions there. So I want to, and I know Councilmember Cubie's already weighed in, but I want to check with everyone else here at the table. So Shelley's suggestion was 1, to update the STEP manual with the assistance of a consultant, and 2 was to form a community group, possibly to also get input on what we might want to do when it comes to actual reforms to that STEP manual. I'm fully supportive of that. Councilmember Cubie said she was as well. Anyone else on council want to weigh in?
This is Councilmember Garland. I'm in support of that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland.
Mayor, this is Randy. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating.
Mayor, this is Joel. I have supported.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. All right. Sounds good. Well, all right, hearing nothing else, it sounds like, Shelley, you've got direction there. And Catherine, thank you so much for the presentation. But we are going to go forward and update the STEP manual with the help of selecting a consultant to go through that for us. And we're also going to talk about forming a community group to provide input, not only to staff, but frankly to council as well. So it sounds like we've got consensus. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The other thing I would like to explore moving forward with staff, just before we totally close out this item, and I know that we want to talk about, there was a conversation about how we fund these programs. I know there's been about, I know we could talk about funding a traffic program through development projects, and sometimes development projects allow us to get additional revenue to fund other needs for our community and for our residents. But as we all know, not every development project actually has a development agreement. And so sometimes that's not the case. I'm also thinking as well, maybe I'll ask this question to Mr. Ching. Is it possible for something like this, when we talk about the Northwest Tempe neighborhoods, as opposed to going through the Marianne Quarter Neighborhood Block Grant Program, and I'm not asking for any council consensus on this, just to explore this further at the moment, but if it's possible that that kind of project could simply, since it is a large-scale project, to be added to a CIP possibly for 2021? Mr. Ching, I see your microphone's on, but we don't hear anything.
Oh, I was double muted. Sorry, Mr.
There
Mayor.
you are.
Okay, very good. What I was saying when I was muted was the answer is yes. The council will evaluate next year's CIP during the regular budget cycle, and we can make a note budget-wise that there's an interest in moving something like this into the capital program, and then you would have the opportunity to look at all the other competing capital projects and make a determination at that point as to the prioritization of this versus everything else. So yes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ching. Appreciate it. Just, an option for the council to explore. Once again, I don't need any direction on that right now, but just some, just something for us to explore moving forward. If that might be a better route to go with large-scale projects like this, that is, I think most of us all agreed would really help to make a make a, I don't want to say improvement, but would really help to assist the neighborhood in frankly obtaining the goal that they're trying to reach. So, appreciate that, Mr. Ching. All right, so we'll also talk about that. So great. Thank you very much. Next up, we have item 2F, which is Sing Meadows and Indian Bend Wash. Do I have anyone, Madam Clerk, any public comment cards on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we do have Darlene Justice on the line, and then I have one additional card to read into the record when she is done.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We need to celebrate the fact that Sing Meadows, with Mr. Singh and his family members, have this wonderful business in Tempe. There is so very much for all of us to learn from their organic and sustainable farming practices. Recently, Sing Meadows has even become a regional marketplace, also offering organic fruit and vegetables from some of the struggling farms throughout Arizona. The pandemic has caused severe distribution issues, and Ken Sing has stepped up to help. They have also reorganized so that you can go to a drive-through to pick up your order or actually do some shopping from your car. Tempe needs to support all of these efforts and to embrace and support their valuable concepts by showcasing a true partnership between Tempe and our wonderful Sing Meadows and farming. Please vote to support option C, revising the lease to 20 years and sending the maintenance of the remaining 52 acres for RFPs for organic management. I support this proposal. I think that we have a wonderful group that is here within Tempe that really, really needs to be showcased. And I appreciate all the work that people have done and council members and that. Thank you, Lauren Kuby, for your support for so long. Braden Kay, thank you for Steve Mespin, Corey, and all the different, Joel Navarro, Randy Keating, Jennifer, I'm gonna miss somebody. Doreen has got some wonderful ideas. But I think we have a great opportunity with Sing Meadows to show other cities what we have and to help promote organic type farming and no chemicals on our land. That was the plan when they first came, and somehow that got waylaid. We need to look into doing that again, and I hope that everyone understands and values what we really have here with Sing Meadows. Let's turn him from cutting lawn to planting vegetables again. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the consideration for this proposal. Thank you. I'll answer any questions, but I think you all know him so well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Really appreciate it. Anyone from council have any comments or questions for Darlene before we go to our next public comment? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much, Darlene. Once again, really appreciate it. And Madam Clerk, you have another comment card.
I do have one more comment card from Kim Gaffney Loza, resident of Tempe. She writes, "Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm writing in support of Sing Meadows. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, North Tempe Neighborhood Association has not been able to meet so that I could get a consensus vote on support, but we were introduced and asked for our opinion when Ken Sing was first asked to bid on the former golf course. Overwhelmingly, we were not only supportive but excited. Ken's energy and enthusiasm for what he wanted and could create there was inspiring. No one foresaw the obstacles that he would encounter, and yet he forged on. Despite the setbacks, Ken, Lee, and Kawar have always greeted their customers in a positive manner, thanking them for their business. They have graciously allowed me to collect signatures for the Outlaw Dirty Money petition, and I have seen other petition gatherers there as well. Not only were we welcomed, but we were offered refreshment and checked on to see if we were doing okay. Everyone who comes to Meadows is made to feel part of the community. Sing Meadows, even though it has not yet become all Ken has envisioned, is a cultural asset. No other community around has anything like it. People come from all over, not only for the fresh organic produce, but also for the pastoral peace, recalling a less stressful era. Considering the challenges we've had in other areas of Indian Bend Wash, the greater acreage best use is for passive recreation and wildlife refuge. It is not really suited for a business investment, and yet in trying to keep up with its maintenance and still trying to run a business, Mr. Singh has not compromised his standards of organic and chemical-free, which helps not only the immediate environment, but also our water quality going into Tempe Town Lake. Please take this all into consideration when making your choice. Thank you, Kim Gaffney Lozak. And Mayor, that's the extent of all of our cards.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk, and thank you, Kim, for your comment as well. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and turn to, looks like I see Dr. Braden Kay there for a presentation. Go for it, sir.
Thank you so much, and Greg will share the slides for us here. So Braden Kay, Office of Sustainability, here to talk to you about Sing Meadows and Indian Bend Wash. Next slide. So Indian Bend Wash, this particular part of it is 72 acres between Curry and McKellips Road, the old Rio Salado Golf Course. The city holds a long-term lease with Maricopa County Flood Control to maintain the property. In 2014, the city went into a 50-year contract with Sing Soils LLC to maintain and operate sustainability and urban agriculture projects on the site. Next slide. Which brings us to the Sing Meadows that we know today. They've made significant investment in renovating the clubhouse. They operate a farmer's market. As was mentioned, they are now doing a drive-through farmer's market during COVID. They've hosted special events, including a vintage car show and even a circus. And they're a Tempe destination, as was mentioned by our residents, showcasing chemical-free landscaping, promoting the Arizona food economy, and being a model of health and wellness in the region. They are requesting to be responsible for only 20 acres, opposed to the current 72 acres that they're currently responsible for. Staff has the following 4 options. One is no change to the current contract and to ask Ken to proceed operating the business with no change in contract. Option B is to renegotiate the contract and allow him to operate the 20 acres and then provide minimal funding to community services for cleanup and tree trimming. This would require a transfer of $26,000 out of the contingency fund in this fiscal year over to community services. Option C is to renegotiate the contract so that Sing Soils LLC is only responsible for 20 acres, but to provide funding for organic maintenance, irrigation, cleanup, and tree trimming that would keep the property closer to the standards that Sing Soils LLC has been doing up to this point. That would be $95,000 a year in other budget years, but currently what we would be asking for is just over $65,000 to be transferred from contingency to a fund in community services to manage a contract. And then option D is to release an RFQ for completely new programming in the site and to decide to look at other options for programming of the entire 72 acres. So next slide. That's it for our presentation this evening, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kay. All right, anyone from council, any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Braden Kay. Appreciate your presentation. And this is such an investment in our city. And through no fault of his own, there have been a lot of challenges, right? And he has invested. The Singh family has invested quite a sum of money in, from fencing to repairs to copper piping that repeatedly got stolen, you name it. But there are also the challenge from the county and flood control and not being able to really fulfill the plan of having it be an actual urban farm. But he's really made this a spot for recreation, and the lake that was once not necessarily ridden with pesticides, but not pure, is now much more pristine, and it's just a beautiful place where you can walk on the grass and not fear that you're walking on like pesticides. It's just a beautiful place. And there's been many, obstacles that were put in his way. So, I would really propose the more generous option. I know that we keep rating from the contingency fund, but I think it's so important to do more than just minimal maintenance, because we want to maintain those practices. Otherwise, when we get back and our budget is a little bit healthier, we're just going to have to invest more to get it to that state that it was previously in. So I really would advocate, I believe, is that option C, Braden?
Option C, correct.
I would advocate for option C, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done with Sing Meadows.
Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to go with option C. I think Mr. Singh is doing a great job, and he's had a lot of things come up that weren't anticipated. And I would like to just move with option A and help him out and let him grow his vegetables instead of cutting grass, like Darlene said. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm certainly appreciative of what Mr. Singh brings to the city and our community, and we've had events there, and it's fantastic property, and he's very generous. You know, COVID times and all that said, and about option C, I would support option B. We can keep, you know, his areas he can maintain, and we can kind of do a minimal effort on the rest of the land and hope for kind of better days in the future. I'm just worried about, we made so many cuts, and you know, people have been laid off, and I'm just not sure I would be comfortable with option C at this point. But option B is, I kind of see in the middle. I certainly don't want him to leave. I don't want to issue another RFP. I want him to stay there and keep providing you know, his services to our community. But I think option B would probably be the more responsible path in that regard. So that's what I'm supporting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. Councilmember Adams, just a quick question. Just remind me of which option you picked.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you for asking. I go with option C. As
Options. Perfect. Thank you so much. Just wanted to make sure I had it correct. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think a lot of it's been said, and I think we do appreciate Sink Farms. With that being said, I could support option C. I also think that as we go forward, not knowing the uncertainties we have in front of us, I think we also just need to constantly have a yearly evaluation of where things are at. And obviously, you know, we have a responsibility with other things within the city, but I'm willing to stick with option C and then do evaluations to see where we're at. And then also just try to explore any other solutions and options that might pop up down the road for sure. But I can start with option C, but I would like to have an evaluation as we go forward, maybe yearly, just to kind of see how things are moving, how the maintenance is going, and then how things are looking on the responsibility that's put onto the city too. So that'd be my support.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Also, Councilmember Arredondo Savage has informed me that her suggestion is option B. Anyone else have any comments, questions, or want to weigh in? I see Councilmember Garland.
Hi, I just kind of want to echo what Councilmember Navarro said. I also believe that I mean, I've said this before. I think it's Sing Farms is like a diamond in a rough over there, and I think Sing Meadows, I think, is in a unique area, and they're a great community partner, and I'd like to see that continue. I am also supportive of option C, but my question was going to be, if we look at do this contract, is it for a year, or how long is the contract? And so I do agree. I think that C is what I support, but I would also like to know, is it how long is the contract for, and can we look and evaluate later for any other reason? But thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Garland. So the renegotiated contract with Ken Singh would be a long-term contract that would basically be an amendment to his existing 50-year contract. The money involved would be one-time funding for an RFP that would go out for organic landscaping of the property. And to Council Member Navarro's point, that would be a one-year contract with renewals built into it, and we would decide on whether to invest in that contract. You would decide every year through the regular budget process. So this current decision is for 1 year, and then the RFP that we would put out would likely be a 1-year contract with multiple years that we would be able to amend it or add to it depending on funding.
Perfect. Thank you, Braden.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. And my choice is option C. So with that said, it looks like we've got consensus here. So the option is to, if you want to go back here, can we go back to the slide just for 1 second, just so I can read it for the public, if that's possible? Thank you very much. So option C, which is to renegotiate the contract and provide funding for organic maintenance, irrigation, cleanup, and tree trimming. And that would involve $65,334 from the fiscal year 21 contingency fund. So that is the choice of the council. So I think, Braden, looks like you've got your direction.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you so much. All right. Next up here, we've got item 2G, which is support for state of Arizona enforcement actions against Varsity Tavern. And I'm going to go, do I have any comments, whatever, from the public on this one, Madam Clerk?
Nothing for this item, Mr. Mayor.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and call upon staff to make a presentation. Is anyone from staff going to make a presentation on item 2G?
Mayor, this is Randy. I'll speak to it if staff's not.
Sure, Vice Mayor Keating, go for it.
Are we sure staff's not speaking to it though? Like,
I'm checking. Let's see. Mr. Ching, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, hi. Do we know which staff member is going to be giving the presentation on this item?
I know that the letter that was going to be sent was drafted through the attorney's office. I wasn't sure whether or not Ms. Baumann was going to. I know that this came about as a conversation that was had between a council member and some of staff, and it was decided to bring it forward for the purpose of having the rest of council decide whether or not they wish to support sending such a letter. So the actual draft and what you have in front of you is the culmination of that request to have it on the agenda so that council could have a conversation about whether or not to sign on to this.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate that, Mr. City Manager. Thank you. I was just going to ask then, can we post the letter on the screen then, just so the public can actually see it? And then once that's up, Vice Mayor Keating, if you want to begin, once we have the letter up.
That's fine. Thank you.
And actually, Vice Mayor Keating, while it's loading, if you want to go ahead and get started, I'm sure it will pop on the screen any second now.
Yeah.
I'd ask either Greg or Alex to go ahead and get it up on the screen. It should be in the packet.
I actually didn't see it in the packet. I looked earlier. All right, there it is. Okay, so I actually talked to the city attorney about doing this. Varsity Tavern, as my colleagues know, has had multiple severe liquor violations in its short time operating on Mill Avenue. Now they're currently being investigated for forcing an employee to work that they knew had COVID-19 in our city, which of course is not only a violation of CDC guidelines, the governor's executive orders, the mayor's proclamation, but common decency and common sense and ethics. So I wanted to just kind of put the city on record. I know that the liquor board is investigating this, but what's concerning to me is Varsity Tavern is still being allowed to operate during this investigation. And I think time after time, they've showed that they're not concerned with following state or city law with their liquor violations. A young man was severely hurt, that he was underage, served at this establishment, and then fell off the second story. And that's just one of their violations. And then, of course, to knowingly have an infected employee working in our city during a global pandemic, one of which has cost thousands of Arizonans their lives, I think is completely reprehensible. So, we talk a lot about our city's values. Tempe is a spot that people want to be at. And I know that there are certainly other bad actors in our city. I know we've sent letters and demand letters, essentially, trying to force people to comply with executive orders. But it's even amongst those bad actors, I think it's clear that Varsity Tavern is an outlier in that group, which is, you know, pretty sad and pretty sorry. So it's my hope with this letter that we'll kind of put the city on record, you know, telling the liquor board, look, we're not looking for, at least speaking for myself, I'm not looking for some sort of monetary penalty or temporary suspension. I don't believe Varsity Tavern has shown that they share the same values as we as Tempeans do. And I would like to see their license permanently revoked. And though the letter doesn't say that, it does say that we condemn, you know, these actions. And we can't prescribe what the liquor board can do, but we can let them know that we're certainly not happy with this particular establishment. I don't mean to single anyone out, but again, you know, as far as bad actors go, they're certainly an outlier here. So it's my hope that you'll join me in signing on to this letter. Hopefully we can, you know, get some resolution on this matter. And it's my hope get maybe a more responsible establishment into that space. Certainly one that's not going to put young Tempeans who are underage at risk and any Tempean at risk by exposing them to a potentially deadly virus. So thank you very much to you know, our legal team for drafting this up for us and getting it on the agenda. Again, I think it's important that we kind of let the liquor board know where this council is at, especially given everything going on right now with, you know, the spike in cases that we've seen in that particular area. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. Just one quick note, just, you know, before, if this is approved by the council, we just need to correct a couple of typos in the letters. That's one of the, just, you know, for anyone who's seeing it on the screen, kind of, we all see them, but we just wanted to make sure the public knows we do see that, and we will address that if this is indeed approved by council. So next up, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But the question is it for safe gatherings or for safer gatherings? I guess we need to find the author's intent.
I knew that. You were going there, Councilmember Cubie.
But I know that Councilmember Keating is quite the grammarian and will weigh in. But I just want to thank, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. I want to thank Vice Mayor Keating for bringing this issue up. Thanks, Randy. Really appreciate that you did this and fully support signing the letter.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Any other members of council want to weigh in?
Hi, Mayor. This is Councilmember Garland. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate this, you bringing this to the council for us for discussion, and I am in support. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Anyone else from council want to weigh in?
Mayor, this is Joel. I'll support.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Adams. Okay. And I also, so I will just say, I'm not hearing from Councilmember Adams right now. I will also sign on in support. So I guess what I want to do before, so it sounds like we've got consensus because that's at least 5 of us. I want to make sure that before we send it, though, that we do check with Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Arredondo Savage to see if they'd like to be included, just to be, I just want to make sure that no one's name is on the letter on the left-hand corner. Oh, I see Councilmember Adams' microphone.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Woods. I'm happy to have my name on this letter. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, so I guess we'll just check with Councilmember Arredondo Savage to see what she wants to do. But other than that, it looks like we've got consensus to move forward.
Mayor, I have a quick question.
Yes, Vice Mayor Keating.
So the draft I have of this letter says confidential. Is this confidential? Is this now public as of right now? I just want to be clear.
I guess I will ask Ms. Baumann, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. The letter was drafted in a confidential manner to initially circulate to the council, but it certainly is not confidential at this point. So if the council has any questions with respect to the content, or if there are any suggested edits, we can certainly take that into consideration, and I can work with Vice Mayor Keating's council aide and make sure that it gets out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Keating, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else on council, any comments or questions for anybody here before we move on from this? All right, hearing none, it looks like the consensus is to move forward with signing that letter. We'll check with Councilmember Arredondo Savage, but then once we do, that letter will be sent off. So, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, next up here, we have item 2H, which is future agenda items. Does anyone on the council have any future agenda items? I see Councilmember Cuby's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a moment of personal privilege to say that you have a remarkable ability to synthesize the discussion and find consensus. I want to just thank you for that. Every voice is heard and measured, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cuby.
Yeah, about future agenda items, I know we're getting really packed with them, but we are nearing the time for agency review submissions to come from agencies. And I wanted to propose that we explore removing the requirement of TCAA, Tempe Community Action Agency, our CAP agency, to compete for that portion of their funds that are CAP related. And this issue comes up as a controversy every year when we get the agency review results. And I know that years ago, the Honorable Shanna Ellis brought up the same question, and why make TCAA compete for that CAP portion? And an MOU resulted. So, and then it shifted back again to be part of agency review. And so I'd like to see the pros and cons reported back to us. And I guess it would have to be issue review so we can take action that will inform next year's agency review, or not take action. But either way, it's going to inform the agency review process. And I think the timing is such that we would need to do it this fall. So I wanted to ask the mayor's and council's permission to have that be on our future agenda.
Sounds good, Councilmember Cuby. That is just fine with me. We can work with staff to see when we might have a good time to schedule that. So thank you. Anyone else from council have any future agenda items? All right, hearing none. Next item on the agenda is the call to the audience for committee of the whole items listed under sections 4A and 4B. However, there are no items under those sections for this evening. The next section is actually items in progress. So item number 3 here, call the audience. The City Council welcomes public comment at this time for items listed under sections 4A and 4B. Committee of the whole items on this work study agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Madam Clerk, any comment cards or anyone waiting in the queue?
No submissions for these items, Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. All right, next up, we're going to move on to item number 4 here, which is committee of the whole items. Item 4A is items ready for city council direction or status update. There are none. Next up is item 4B, new items for city council consideration. That is also none. Next up is item 4C, which is items in progress. Updates as needed. Do any council members have any verbal updates on the items listed on this agenda? Councilmember Cuby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And perhaps Judy can stop me if I'm incorrect in bringing this up, but this relates to cows very directly. But when we had our retreat, in August, we decided on a new way of conducting business through the committee process. And I'm just wondering whether we can get an update on that. And I think it's really important that council have input into that process. As you remember, I wasn't really in favor of the new process, but I really firmly embrace it now and love to see it get started so we can begin moving, because we haven't had many cow items introduced in over a year. So I wanted to see where we were on that and maybe get a report back in cow.
Sounds good to me. Let's see, I'm trying to think who would be the person tasked with that from a staff standpoint. I guess, Mr. Ching, you and I can talk about that and just see if we can bring something forward to council, just kind of giving the status update of the new committee system, how it's going to work, and exactly when it's going to be fully implemented.
Sounds good, Mr. Mayor. Happy to do that.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Woods. I just want to give a County Island update, a quick update. We are continuing to move forward with the County Island annexation. We have several developers that are quite interested in providing a new and healthy community for North Tempe. Some of the proposals that I've discussed with them are the following: affordable housing, which I just spoke with a developer last week, and they guaranteed affordable housing, which I'm very excited about. A park, condos, apartments, and other positive additions to the city. So I'm just so excited about the county island and moving forward with this, and it's going to really, really change North Tempe for the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Let's see, any other council members have any verbal updates on any items here listed on 4C, items in progress?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you. Just a quick update on the animal welfare program. Council aide Kristen Gwynn approached Fabric, the Fashion and Business Resource Innovation Center, about sewing covers, cat covers, for the traps, and they just rose to the occasion, and they're going to do it for free, and they're going to use material from discarded material from all the PPE gowns that they're creating. So it's going to be a circular economy model for our kitty cats. And I just want to thank Fabric. They are such a great community partner, and thank you, Kristen, for thinking of that, of approaching them, because it's been a really, really great partnership, and it continues to be. So thank you to Fabric, and thank you to Kristen.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Anyone else have any other items they want to give verbal updates on? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to item number 5, mayor's announcements. I don't have any announcements this evening. Mr. City Manager, any announcements on your end?
None on my end. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. All right, with that said, item number 6 is next meeting date, October 1st, 2020. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. And the meeting is adjourned at 7:32 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night and have a great weekend.